Good evening. Welcome to the Diablo 3 podcast. I am your host, Flux, and we are online at diabloii.net. I am joined on the show by non-first-time guests. I have Nerdwords.
Hello.
And Muggazito.
Yeah, greetings.
Actually, Muggs. We don't call him Muggazito.
That's your Hispanic alias.
Yes.
Only his wife who calls him that on Valentine's Day.
Yes, Muggazito.
So both you guys wanted to be on the show last week, and then you were like, oh, wait, it's Valentine's Day. I'll sleep on the couch for a month if I'm on the podcast. So is part of your prenuptial agreement that it preclude you from being on podcasts on Valentine's Day, or what?
Yeah, I could kind of see that one.
Probably so.
Yeah. I don't know if it was in the prenup, but, it's an unstated, maybe you might want to spend time with the SO.
Yeah, it wasn't even a question. It was more like I know better. Like I probably shouldn't spend a couple hours in the back room talking about Diablo when I know it's Valentine's Day.
So you were busy picking the thorns off rose petals and rose vines and strewing rose petals across the floor and stuff.
Yeah, totally.
And polishing corns, on the foot and stuff.
Exactly. I thought you were dating a unicorn for a second, like polishing corns. You're pretty
you
awesome.
have an awkward relationship.
Exactly. There's something awkward about unicorns. We
Uh,
were talking about furries 2 weeks ago.
I
So
know.
right back in.
I was hoping we were going to go that way again.
Also with the furries. So we are talking about a little bit of recent current play stuff and some things about legendary gems, and then we're going to get into some history of the earlier podcasts. This should actually probably have been episode 200. That was last week's show. And I recorded about 2 hours with Aahz, and the first hour was on recent play stuff and a bunch about Diablo 3 legendary items based on some John Yang comments about them. And then I ended up saving the podcast review stuff with him for a separate episode. So in theory, I will edit that into this show after we talk about legendary gems and before we talk about podcasts, because I'm really skilled in Audacity. I can put 2 files into 1 file. Pretty awesome that way,
Your
man.
talent is amazing.
Like Kanye West is online too. He wants me to come save the history of Pablo, or what that bullshit album's called, because he needs someone editing help, but I'm a little busy with that right now. Yo, Kanye, later for you, man. All right, we're getting on that. He's going to send over Kardashian, and that'll make it all better.
No, I don't think it will.
So first off, just a little bit of recent play stuff. Neither of you guys have been on the podcast for a couple of weeks. Is power creep creeping? Have you hit GR 100? What are you up to lately, Nerdwords?
Power creep is real, but it hasn't really affected me that much because my playtime slowed down. I just hit Paragon 800, which is low for a lot of people that have been playing a bunch. Yeah, the power creep's definitely real. I mean, my playtime hasn't nearly matched what it's been in the last seasons, and I've done my normal thing where I rush the beginning of the season, played a whole bunch, and then kind of play as much as I can during work, and then take weekends when I can. And normally I finish the season about Paragon 650, 700, and I've already hit 800. We still have a little ways to go. So I haven't really tried.
You have 2 months to go, man.
Yeah, I know. So I haven't really tried pushing yet. I'm still kind of just I have 3 pieces that are non-ancient that are bothering the hell out of me. And I've already, augmented all the other pieces, so I'm just, trying to fine-tune that stuff. But I've cleared 75 pretty easily. I failed on the 76 once, and I was like, okay, I'll come back later.
What's the top wizard clear at this point?
82 or 3? Hang on, let me look.
No. It's 88
No, it's
or
80.
89.
Yeah, it's an 89. It was an 89. Yeah. They did it with a teleport build, too.
But to get back to work there, dude. Are you even the top 1,000? Not even, right?
Oh, no, I haven't even tried. I think it's 78 to get in the top 1,000 right now for Wizard.
You're not too far off.
Oh, yeah, no. I mean, you could get there pretty easy. I've done 80s in group, but I just haven't, tried pushing at all.
People have done 105 in group, dude. What are you doing?
Well, exactly, yeah.
And you're a wizard. All you got to do is sit there and nuke things when they hold them still for you. It's the easiest part in the game.
Yeah, the problem is having 3 other people that in tune with the meta.
Yeah, that understand that you don't pull things to the center of the room. You have to put it in corners and by little nooks and crannies and stuff like that.
Yeah, 89.
Is that what you've been up to? Have you been up to that, Muggs? Are you an ultimate support character now?
No, I don't. I've actually. I started with.
Have you hit P1000 yet?
No, I'm just shy. I'm 987 or something like that. Whew. So I started with a Wiz. I got to Greater Rift 80. And then I felt like I was just kind of topping out, on what I could solo, and because I really don't enjoy the 3 ZDPS wizard meta. It's fun for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, but it's painfully boring. It's you literally just hold one button for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. So I re-rolled a Crusader because they could actually farm pretty high solo, and I just did an 81 this morning on the Crusader.
Nice.
So
Yeah,
so I got 80 on the Wiz.
Classes this season.
Yeah, 80 on 2 classes this season and P1000. So, I mean, I'm kind of up beyond what I wanted. That's what my goal was 80 and P1000. So Now I got 2 80s in them.
So you took your goal and you doubled it.
Yeah, I pulled the Jay Wilson.
You Wilsoned it.
Yeah.
Awesome. I have done neither of those things, so I'm still playing hardcore and mostly Demon Hunter, but I didn't. I got my first Wizard of the season. I was playing Marauder set, kind of without even looking at the new builds and stuff, and easily got to like 66, which at the time I was in like I don't know, it was about 250 on the realm at that point. And that character died through some carelessness, and then I've been playing much less since then. I've been really busy with work, but I've been doing some just Natalia set with my new Demon Hunter, and there's no Natalia's builds in hardcore that are anywhere near the top. The top hardcore one is like 87 now or 88 or something.
Wow.
So, and you need to be like in the I think 67 or 68 to be in the top 1,000. So I'm no longer even in the top 1,000 with my best score from like
really for Demon Hunter, because the top softcore Demon Hunter's in 88.
Maybe it's like 82. It's in the 80s. So.
I was gonna say,
80s or high 70s.
I was gonna flip out. I was gonna be like, that is damn impressive.
I was just looking last night briefly, just seeing am I even in the top 1,000 anymore. I'm like, no, I'm like like a minute and a half off the top 1,000 at this point. So which isn't bad considering I last played that character like 4 weeks ago, but I have all new Marauder stuff, and I guess I'm going to start doing make another Demon Hunter and do some Marauders. I really enjoyed the Natalias just for farming, because the Natalias you can do the what's the set that you get the that let you get double Death Breath drops?
Sages.
Yeah, Sages. You can do that with Natalias. Obviously, you can't do it with the other sets because all 3 items overlap, but with Natalias you have a ring and a weapon, so you can use Natalia set and get Sages set, and I can do GR8s in that in like 2.5 minutes. I mean, not GR8s, T8 rifts in like 2, 3, 4 minutes. Zoom, kill everything with one shot with your Rain of Vengeance, which is really fun. I can't do T10 that quickly, but you're getting 2 or 3 death breaths for every single elite you find, and you just rack up the.
Yeah, I do that on my Talrasha Wizard. Run Sages and can run about 2-minute T10s. Yeah,
I was gonna say, but you can do T10s with your. Of course, you're also softcore with it too. But.
So I mean, it's just glad, but you don't die. Gold Wrap and Boon of the Hoarder. I'm a god.
I'm also using Boon of the Hoarder with that too. So it's not exactly a power build, but I can do GR60 pretty easily with that character. I really haven't even tried to push it, but I mean, there's so many guys up in the high 70s and almost all Marauders. A few UE, but almost all Marauders this season, obviously with Demon Hunters. But I kind of miss. I mean, I was just like sport farming GR60, like a month ago with nothing augmented, not even a good ancient weapon, like level 25 and 30 on my legendary gems, that kind of shit. It's just that Marauders is crazy powerful this season.
And Caldesians is really powerful. Like when you start throwing Caldesians on stuff.
I've done none of those yet.
Yeah, that's one of the things I definitely feel for my hardcore, brethren, whatever you want to say. Because when I switched from Wizard to Satyr, I had to redo Caldesians on all my stuff, and it takes forever to get like level 70 gems or whatever gems you want to choose. You kind of want to go for whatever your max level is onto your gear. I mean, it takes forever. It's obscene. So I couldn't imagine like dying and then losing all those and then having to do it again. It was bad enough just leveling gems.
Yeah, looking at the top Demon Hunter last night, the top hardcore Demon Hunter, he had every single one of them was like 415, which is like level 80 gems.
Wow.
I'm like, that's like a lot of time. I haven't played that much time in the last 5 seasons combined.
I don't even have level 80 gems on all my gear. Of course, I don't group, so he probably groups.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm sitting too. Like if I like all my friends that played at the beginning of the season kind of like have phased out at this point a little bit, so I kind of jump into public games or I'm playing solo.
Yeah, looking right now, it's level 80 is the highest hardcore seasonal Demon Hunter.
Okay.
1452. No one else has gotten a bunch of other 79s and 78s, but yeah, and it's all Marauders and every single item on him.
Yeah, I wouldn't imagine that the strafe build would make it very far in hardcore. It's probably too squishy.
Yeah, he doesn't even have the killing power really.
Oh, no,
he doesn't even have
the Legacy of Nightmare did an 88 in the EU.
Oh, good for him.
So, I mean, it's got the power. It's just you're squishy. It's a lot of fishing. I don't think it would work in hardcore.
I don't even know how that would work because you need the power of it is because you get to cast Rain of Vengeance so frequently. And
he was using Fan of Knives.
Oh, just Fan of... Yeah, I see. You just Fan of Knives and it stacks 30 times and stuff.
Yeah. He was hitting for, if you watch the video, he was hitting for over 1 trillion. I mean, it was obscene amounts of damage. Like, absolutely.
Yeah, I've heard that build. That's popular. Yeah, that's like a big softcore build and not so much hardcore because, it's like you'll die.
Yeah, you die a lot. I die with my long fade. I couldn't play it.
I'm sure it's really fun once.
Yeah, you get to play it for a little bit, make it to the top, and die.
Looking at it doesn't show you the augmented items in the BattleNet profile. Now you got to look when you're actually in the game. So
yeah, the BattleNet profile doesn't update at all, which is really annoying for like sites like D3 Planner or whatever that you happen to use.
Tragic.
Tragic.
Okay, so anyway, that's recent play stuff, I guess. You guys enjoying the season on the whole, the power creep? I want to do a whole thing on the podcast about maybe next episode if I have time to research it some. Just go look at what the highest of like every class and stuff was in the the highest GR like every season, and just see how much it's gone up. Because it does seem to me like it's gone up a lot more this one than the past couple. Like the other ones were creep, this one's leap, right?
I remember 80s last season. Like towards the end of the season, there was people hitting 80 or at least,
that was in group.
No, there were solos. I believe there were solos that were at 80. I don't think they're. I honestly think some of the classes are going to get to 100 solo by the end of the season if they don't completely burn. I mean, there's the Crusader. When I checked earlier today, there was a 91. So, I'm not sure about all the classes, but it's you got to remember these guys are. There's people with Paragon 25. Excuse me, Paragon 2500 already. Plus,
like how you said people.
Well, yeah. Well, they're bots.
Like part of the team is people.
Yeah,
part of the team is a robot.
Well, the person that runs the Greater Rifts is a person, but the bot that gets them there. But they're Paragon 2500. Plus, they have 107 gems in their gear and all the rest of that garbage. So I can only imagine how much Paragon they'll wind up having at the end of the season.
Yeah, we can. I guess we'll debate that next show. Save some content. Just looking at people have gotten over 100 in a 4-player now.
Yeah, it's 107. Wow, really?
Oh yeah, there's a bunch of 101s.
That's
multiple 101s and multiple hundreds. So who knows? I have no news post about that. Anyway, yeah. So power creep is obviously creeping. Are you guys feeling? I remember when like GR20. I mean, remember when getting your legendary gems to 25 was like, ooh, wow, I can get that extra power now.
Yeah.
Like you had to work for it. Now it's like you just do empowered rift to like 60. It's like, okay, now I can start thinking about money. Does it feel? I mean, should the secondary power on gems be at level 50 now or something? I mean, is this ridiculous?
I wouldn't mind maybe if they added like a tertiary power, like a level 50 or level 60 or level 70 power. But I don't know.
You said tertiary.
Oh yeah, well, isn't that secondary, tertiary? Right?
If you're playing along at home, that is the magic word of the night, and you should take a shot.
For those playing the home game.
I
wouldn't mind. I mean, I don't think they need to move the secondary. I mean, it's just one of those. I would like to see maybe a revamp to some of the gems. Maybe.
Yeah, we're getting to that in a minute. So. Yeah,
but I mean, I don't think. I don't think the secondary needs to be moved unless they make it more powerful and then make it higher. But at this point, it's just it's whatever. Like you said, people are running empowered. I was running empowered 75s earlier today. I mean, it completely broke my bank. I'm like down to like
too much gold, dude.
No, I have no gold now. Like I have literally no gold. So. But
what's an empowered 75 cost?
540 million.
And that's worth it for one more roll.
Yeah.
I mean, what else are you going to do with your gold?
Yeah, what else am I going to do with it?
I mean, that's the whole
repairs?
thing. That's why I like it. Like, I mean, repairs. You really think we die a lot more than we do.
But repairs are like
everyone repairs
like
were expensive in Diablo 3.
Yeah, well, I mean, but repairs now are like 50K. It's like it's not even like a T10 Rift worth of gold.
You run 10 empowered 70s, and then you run 10 non-empowered 70s, and you'll have enough to do 5 or 6 more right after that. So you get the gold back quick.
Yeah, remember when gold was rare? That's coming up in our podcast review. Back when being in the Billionaire Club was like an amazing achievement. It was entirely based on the auction house, of course.
Yeah, it was a lot. Yeah, RNGesus.
So the other recent thing this week was an interesting forum post by Wyatt Cheng where someone bitched about he doesn't like using Taeguks. The players like, I don't like Taeguks. It's too much trouble to keep it active. It seems janky. And Wyatt's like, yeah, okay, you're correct. It is in fact janky. So to briefly quote what Wyatt actually said, Taeguk was intended to be a gem that was great for players who use movement-based channeled skills like Strafe or Whirlwind. It feels bad shooting multi-shot into thin air just to keep the Taeguk stacks up. Well, welcome to Focus and Restraint, right?
Yeah.
And we want to look at some changes that would give players other options. We wanted to avoid changes to Taeguk that would further cement Taeguk as a gem that is strong regardless of playstyle. We're still working out the best way to address this, but if we change Taeguk to adjust it more for channeled skills, then we would certainly provide other comparable alternatives, probably in the form of buffs to some other legendary gems. So, is there a Taeguk build that's valuable with Wizards, and do you just use it anyway, like Focus Restraint?
There is a Taeguk build, but nobody uses it.
Yeah, I mean, you can use it, like, if you're... It's just not necessary, because you only really use it for what the Taurasha build, and then, even then...
It's just not worth it.
Yeah, because you're already doing T10 with that anyway, so it's like, you really don't need the extra.
Yes, but it's none of the higher-end GR builds.
No, not this season.
Not for Wizard.
Yeah, not this
How about that? How about the Crusader stuff you're doing, Bugs?
No, actually nothing. Thankfully, nothing uses it. And like back to what you said before, it's like, do you remember when 25 was hard to cap out? Well, back when you were only trying to get 25 stacks on a Taeguk, that was easy. Now when people are stacking them up to 80 or 90, and you lose all of them in 3 seconds, that's where the issue really lies.
Yeah.
Before it didn't matter. You lost 25 stacks, you got them back up in 20 seconds, big deal. But now you lose 25, you lose 90 stacks, and it takes you 60 seconds to get them back up. And some of these rifts or gryphs are like 2 mobs and a door, and then 2 mobs and a door, so you're constantly stacking them as you're loading back in.
Yeah, and if you have a slow loading level, then you lose it all when the level's loading, which is really annoying.
Yep.
Not even the carelessness of play. Yeah, but Wyatt, obviously a lot of the comments, and suggestions about Taeguks all over time have been, how about if you only lose, you lose 10 stacks, or you use half your stacks, and then if
or
you
it stacks down.
More seconds,
I always like that.
Or you lose more.
Right.
Instead of it being, and Wyatt said nothing about that in his reply. Maybe they'll think about that. But his entire reply was like, it's meant to be used for channeled skills, and we'll make other things for people who aren't really using it that way. Which doesn't answer the problem of slow low-level loading and you lose 90 stacks. But
well, they always have, this like illusion that they're going to come up with some elegant idea to whatever solution there is. It's like, there's the simple solution, but we're not going to go for the simple thing. We're going to try to come up with something more elegant that kind of fits the gameplay dynamic. You got to spin it like the devs speak. So yeah, they could just make it stack down, and that would make total sense for most people. Or they're going to completely just revamp the gems and then just start from there and then give people a whole new other thing to complain about.
I think they should do both. I mean, make it... They could easily fix it. Just make it like those new shoulders that only work with channeled skills. Or like a... those shoulders only buff the damage of certain skills. Strafe and Whirlwind and, Fire Bass and some other crap like that.
Yeah, anything that's a channel.
And they could
Tempest
also
Rush.
make it... Yeah, rapid fire, etc. But they could also make it so you only lose, 10 stacks each time you go over the time, and you can get it back. I mean, maybe it's too easy at that point. I mean, you want there to be some skill to it. I mean, back in the old days of resource management, it was actually hard to keep that buff up. Like, you'd run out of resources and have to do stuff. But now we have so much cooldown gear and so many other objects to keep your resources up that I only ever lose it now if I just totally forget while I'm picking up garbage, or
Zoning.
if I have a slow level load.
Yeah, zoning in a level. Any of that.
And of course, the annoying thing is using it in normal play, like doing bounties, and every time you click one of those stupid, open the rusty cage to free the barbarian, you're just motionless for 5 seconds. Like, bye-bye, Taeguks. Nice knowing you.
Yeah, but you shouldn't really. Nowadays T10 is such a joke. It's it's what T6 was. You shouldn't even be using it. I would drop the Taeguk altogether.
Yeah, you don't really need it, but it's just sort of annoying that you lose it while doing it, an unavoidable game mechanic.
Right.
I was looking at this question in the chat the other night, in our clan chat. Why is it that we can destroy the world and kill monsters in one shot, and we can't open a rusty cage to free some NPC in less than 5 seconds?
Because
shouldn't we be able to just blast the cage apart from 100 miles away or something?
Because a wizard did it.
Wizard did it. Somebody in clan chat, I wish I remembered who, it was very clever, said, because you didn't specialize in lockpicking. And I'm like, okay, you win this debate. Always one step ahead. Well, that was a pretty good answer. But yes, obviously we did not boost our lockpicking skills enough, so we can't free the barbarian under 5 seconds, or free the angel, or whatever the hell the thing you're doing. So, what do you guys think about the general? You're not using Taeguk much. I've been using Demon Hunter, and you use it, of course, nonstop with a strafing Demon Hunter using Talias. About half the people using UE or Marauders use it. Not everyone does. Some people, Zays and Bane of the Trapped are pretty much mandatory, and then not always people are using Taeguk because of what Wyatt just said. It's annoying to have to cast multi-shot or cluster arrow at nothing just to keep your Taeguk stacks up. But there are other builds, obviously, that use it and alternate the skills in. And it's really just sort of a legendary gym form of hatred and focus and restraint to some extent.
Right.
You just got to cast something to keep the stacks up. But as so whatever they fix Taeguks with.
Well, and it's also the only gem that gives a offensive and defensive buff.
Yeah, which is really handy with Natalia's, I can tell you that much. That's like half my duffness on those.
Yeah, that makes a big difference.
But so people started suggesting, how about, as Wyatt said, we're going to buff other gems. And neither of you guys have a build that really uses Taeguks, and the build I'm using is one of the ones that supports Taeguks because it's channeling. But other builds that feel forced to use it just to get the bonuses, and if they eliminate it from those, do you see obvious replacements?
Well, I would like to see a couple. It seems almost everybody uses Bane of the Trapped. Anybody who's pushing greater risks, they use Bane of the Stricken because that's what it was designed for. Bane of the Powerful is completely fallen out. So, I mean, there's a couple gems, like, I think it's, what the hell is that gem? The one where you get stunned and it heals you, which is completely worthless.
I've got all the defensive gems here. We can talk about some buffs to those or how to make them more viable.
I mean, I know there's people in hardcore that use Moratorium because I see posts on the forums about it'll kill you anyway in the set dungeons, Moratorium will. And Mutilation Guard, I think that's the other one.
I like that a lot, like 2 seasons ago.
Well, no, but you have the boots from season 2. It's like they overlap. I mean, Act 2, not season 2. So that I've never seen anybody use. Moratorium, I know people in hardcore. Some people use it. Wreath of Light.
I used to like Molten Wildebeest also.
Molten Wildebeest. I mean, back when Firebirds was casting a blizzard and running around, I loved Molten Wildebeest. It was like my favorite. But
I still use it when I use Arcane Orb like range build.
Yeah, I mean, if you got a range build, it's actually, if you're not getting hit very often, it's a great build. It's a great gem.
So what do you guys feel about the legendary gems on the whole? I mean, you have various builds you're using. Is there like a really obvious, you must use these 3 and nothing else?
Yeah, Bane of the Trap, Bane of the Stricken, and
then there's
Bane of the Trap
one.
and Bane of the Stricken are going to be in like 90% of the builds out there. So those need to be looked at because they're not interesting. And it's like, I can't think of another one. I mean, it seems like the third one's always kind of switched out.
Yeah, usually is Esoteric Alteration. Gizzard can be one. Pain Enhancer's a good one.
Well, Zaze is mandatory for some builds. I mean,
yeah, but Zaze is like
the only ranged class in the game is a Demon Hunter.
Exactly.
Right. Well, Zaze is cool because it's like really a ranged thing. It's like I want to be at range and like I want to shoot from as far as possible and kind of keep distance. So I want to buff my damage based on the distance. So it's like that's a cool gem because it fits
I'd like to
play
see
style.
Zaze get more power because that might help the wizard get to where range would be a little bit more competitive.
Zaze is really strong. Zaze is like just as
it is.
Zaze and Bane of the
Trap.
Trap.
It's not as strong as Audacity though. That's the problem.
Yeah, well, Zaze and Bane of the Trap are the only ones that, for people following at home, are the only ones that use what's called their own multiplier. They're not part of your dibs. So Zace is like its own multiplier when it comes to your damage. Bane of the Trapped is its own multiplier when it comes to damage. So those 2 gems alone are incredible. If you could run both of those in any build, you'd probably be in a good spot. And I think that's why M6 does it with Freezer or whatever. Freeze.
Yeah, and UE does it also sometimes. But I mean, obviously the gems that add a percentage based is more useful than plus X amount because as you get bigger and bigger, the percentages get bigger and bigger. So.
Well, Gem of These.
Everybody uses Bane of the Trapped. No one uses Gem of These. What are you talking about?
I like Gem of These. It's like the best one. Like, hey, can you power level me real fast? I got a level 80 Gem of These.
Why would you power level? You play softcore.
Because you want to because I don't feel like swapping characters or swapping gear, so I just make a new character.
Yeah, I'm actually going to make a Demon Hunter next time I have a chance to play, just 'cause I'm tired of switching gear around between...
Well, yeah, I mean, I have 3 Wizards and a Crusader. I'm probably going to make another Crusader just because I don't want to move gear around.
Yeah, right.
Well... We'll get that spec button pretty soon. It'll be no more problems with this. So, so Wyatt's changed to Taeguk. We're not sure what they're going to do with that. Obviously, that's kind of a specialty thing that some classes use, but there's not. It just definitely seems they could buff some of the gems. I mean, people, as you mentioned a second ago, what's good about Taeguk is it gives you offensive and defensive buffs, which are more useful to some classes than others. But so looking at the 5 legendary gems that are primarily defensive, some of which are hardly ever used. We just mentioned Esoteric Alteration. Reduces damage from non-physical and gives you a huge resistance buff when you're below 25% hit points. So do you see any obvious change to make that additionally beneficial, or can that even be fixed?
Esoteric is an amazing gem.
Yeah, I think it's already one of the best defensive gems.
Yeah, especially for int classes because it boosts your all resist. So for wizards and for witch doctors, it is probably the gem to use. For a 3rd gem.
If you're dying or if you're having survivability problems, then almost 100% of the time we put that in.
Yeah.
And so adding an offensive buff would mean nothing because it's already popular for you guys.
Right. It's a very popular gem. It's used in a lot of Witch Doctor and... I mean, it's used in a lot of just builds, period. All the ZDPS will run an Esoteric. Wizards run an Esoteric. Obviously, if your all resist is low, it becomes less effective. But it's still leveled up. It's better than most people's passives. Most people have a passive that says reduces non-physical damage or elemental damage by 20%. You can get an Esoteric way beyond that passive. So it's really good in that regard.
It's funny, one of the things that John Yang talked about on last week's show about the legendary item post-mortem thing was the one chest armor, the Shu Miserables or whatever the hell it's called, that gives you a damage buff if you're below 25% health.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, okay, you could add a damage buff to Esoteric Alteration. Then when people try to somehow keep below 25% hit points at all times just to get this huge damage buff, which is exactly what they're trying to fix with this one chest armor in the game. So that seems like it's pretty much non-starter for that buff.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't mind it just being a defensive gem. Like, this is a defensive gem, and it's a really good defensive gem.
But that's the one. Yeah, that's the one that people actually use, though.
Yeah.
How about Mutilation Guard? And some of these are not so popular, but or better yet, going alphabetically, Invigorating Gemstone.
That's useless. Absolutely useless.
What is that? What
reduces your damage? Let me just tell the properties, and you can say why it's so horrible. Reduces damage while under CC effects and heals 20% of your life when a CC hits you. And my next note says useless. We obviously agree.
That was the PvP gem. That's what that was.
Yeah, I'll get rid of that.
I mean, but CC crowd control is a non-issue for unless you're a wizard.
Now that every class has permanent CC from some skill in the game.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, unless you're a wizard, like you have permanent CC immunity in some way, shape, or form in some build that's your goal. That's what you're going for. You're even speccing into specific items to avoid CC, like ice climbers or something like that. So it's a non-issue. Basically, if you're getting CC'd, you're dying anyway.
Yeah.
So,
exactly.
I mean,
which is the time that you want defense to kick in, but at that point, it's typically too late. So.
Right, but I mean, it's plus there's the ramp up now for Frozen. So I mean, when I was just doing my 81 today on my Seder, like I could not even stand in the ramp up of Frozen. It would kill me. So it's like, let alone sit there and get frozen by it. So I mean, it's worthless, Jim. Plus, like you said.
And that doesn't count as, I don't believe that counts as a CC until it actually pops. So you're just taking damage without getting the reduction.
Yeah, so it doesn't count as CC until it pops. And like you said, you got Vengeance, you've got Wrath of the Berserker, you got Epiphany, you've got Akarat's Champion, that all break CC anyway. So, or make you immune to it. And with CDR, you can have those up pretty much all the time. So
is there any way to fix this, Jim? I mean, without just a teardown?
No, it needs to go away.
Yeah.
Immunity to CC full time? I mean, you already have that, I guess.
Yeah, but that's just it. You have full time immunity to CC, and it would overlap with Esoteric. Most people aren't going to run 2 defensive gems, so.
N3rdwards does. He likes to be really safe.
I do.
That's why he kicked the GRA.
Yeah, that's the reason why I haven't gotten that far yet.
Those repair expenses were just killing you, so you're like, I'm not going to die anymore.
I'm really poor. I mean, I was empowering every rift I did, so.
So the next one, alphabetically, on defensive gems is Moratorium, which staggers all the damage you take over 3 seconds. And that always seemed a little bit of high concept when they were first introducing it, like back in the days of really spiky damage.
Yeah.
And it's like they've kind of gotten rid of most of the spiky damage, unless you get to really high GRs in which all damage is spiky damage. So, is anybody using this currently? Do you see any way to make this one more viable?
I mean, I wish. I mean, I feel like that when this was first announced, I thought that this plus wildebeest skids would be a really interesting combination, to have the damage staggered and then really high life per second return. But it just never really panned out to be useful.
And you can't stagger it over that. I mean, it's 1/10 of a second per level, if I remember correctly. So it's you're not going to get it. You might get it over 4 seconds or 5 seconds or 6 seconds, that you're going to stagger this stuff. And what winds up happening anyway is if your life regen isn't high enough, you die anyway. You just die 6 seconds later.
Yeah.
So it's like one of those gems. Apparently people are using it because there was a big post on the forums about beware hardcore characters. You can still die in a set dungeon if you have the Moratorium gem on. So I'm guessing there's people in hardcore, people that feel that it's necessary, but it's very situational. How do you die in a
set dungeon anyway?
Moratorium will kill you.
It's they're like T3. You can't even take enough damage.
I don't know.
Well, there's that one stupid wizard dungeon you have to die on purpose to
Firebird
the trigger, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think we can all agree wizard players deserve to die anyway. Oh, wait. I can't agree with that. So next one up is Molten Wildebeest Gizzard, which was really popular at some point. That gives you massive regen per second. It starts at 10,000, and you get a lot higher very quickly. And it gives you a little shield if you don't take any damage for, 4 seconds? which is like 200% of your life, and you can see basically you can sort of go along unless you take over 200%
of your life per second.
You can yeah, that's right. You can keep it up pretty much forever. So basically, you can kind of never take damage if all the damage you take is minor.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some things in the game that really work well with that. There's that, what's that helm? Pride's Fall.
Yep.
Right.
Where the Act 2, is it Act? Yeah, it's Act 2 cash helm. Where that used to be a really popular thing with Marauders. No one cares anymore because now you can get better options. But that used to give you a big reduced resource cost buff if you went 5 seconds without being hit. And you can combine that with Moratorium and you combine that with Molten Wildebeest and basically never get hit.
Mm-hmm.
Technically, hit, air quotes. So is anybody using Molten Wildebeest still? I mean, that was great about 2 seasons ago in Hardcore. You guys are occasionally seeing it now?
I mean, it was popular
in
Softcore up until last season.
Yeah, I use it. I've used it here and there.
Yeah, it's still a popular gem. It's just being slowly replaced by Esoteric because the damage now that we're getting into the 80s and 90s and 100s is not. You can't get that gem high enough to actually heal you back up. Like if you take the damage, you're gonna. You got to prevent the damage. You can't you can't out heal the damage. Even last season with heal monks, they all ran Molten Wildebeest and kiting builds, which are pretty much non-existent, would run it. But other than that, it doesn't really see a place.
Yeah, I'm trying to I've bbeen saying all season trying to make a ranged Delcers work as high as I possibly can, and I'm running Wildebeest Gizzard for that. And I'm pairing it with one of the wizard passives, Galvanizing Ward pairs with it really well, and then the Crom's Belt with the shield, and then the new Blood Bracer. It's a really nice little combo of items, but it's not enough to push GR 85 or 90.
It doesn't work with the Blood Bracer. The Molten Wildebeest shield isn't buffed by the.
Oh yeah, no, I know,
Oh, okay.
But it's just a combination of the shields.
Yeah, it is a lot of shield.
Mm-hmm.
What if we combine Moratorium with Molten Wildebeests? And you were just saying that we're
right.
trying to do both at once. What if one gym did both of those?
Now that'd be cool.
Still not good enough.
I mean, that would be interesting. That would definitely. I would like to see it.
Yeah, I'd try. I'd test it. Put it on PTR. Give it to me.
Because you're spreading all your damage over 5 seconds, and then you're healing 100k per second. So
that'd be an incredibly defensive gem for sure.
Yeah, I could see that working.
Well, I'm sure Wyatt will get right on that.
Yeah.
Other than that, how could Molten Wildebeest be improved? I mean,
I like it for what it does.
What if you got a big damage buff while it was while you had the shield up? I mean, you're trying to never take damage, and you're getting a huge damage buff at the same time.
I mean, anything you add to it, I think, would be sweet. A damage buff would definitely be sweet, but I think that Esoteric is probably one of the better defensive gems already. So I think that as is, I still use it. I mean, even if I'm doing public greater rifts and people really really suck, I'll pop out something else and pop that in just for safe measure. I've done it several times.
So then you can tank and save your friends because you don't want them to die because you're a nice person?
Actually, yeah.
Yeah, kind of. So the last one is Mutilation Guard. It reduces melee damage and lets you move unhindered from below 50% hit points. This one seems pretty much useless at this point, right?
Yeah.
I've never used it. I've never seen anybody use it. Melee damage, first of all, isn't that big of a deal, even though it's unavoidable. Plus, you have String of Ears Belt if you really want to avoid melee damage reduction, which is probably a better option. And move hindered through enemies. Below 50% life, you may move through enemies unhindered. Again, you got the boots from Act 2. What are they called?
Illusory boots.
Illusory boots. There you go. Give you the same thing. Or 90% of the damn travel or movement spells that exist in the game, like Vault and Teleport and Dashing Strike and
that stupid horse
thing. Yeah,
that stupid horse.
F that stupid horse thing. Man.
Yeah, the horse and Spirit Walk. Did I name them all? Leap, Charge.
So what would be an improvement to Mutilation Guard that can make it useful? What if you had the full time unhindered, all the time? So it wouldn't matter?
No, because melee damage reductions is a non-issue.
I think actually that would be cool for speed builds, though. I think that'd be an option because that'd give me a different legendary gem that I would use rather than using the boots. Then I'd free up my boot slot for a different slot, a different legendary I could use for my speed farming. So I think that it could find a place if it was like that. It could find a place in speed builds, but not so much in pushing or anything.
I mean, if it was 100% may move through enemies unhindered, I would see ZDPS running it instead of illusory boots. But I wouldn't see anybody else ever running it. Because melee damage is just a non-issue. It's there's nothing really melee damage is all telegraphed. There's not, anything that's really going to hit you is a big overhead swing or mallet.
What about if it was 25% damage reduction and at level 25 unlocked move through enemies unhindered?
Well, then it's a better esoteric. If it's just a 25% flat damage reduction, then it's a better esoteric.
True.
So.
Yeah, I guess the real problem there is that melee damage is so much less impactful.
Well, I guess
every kind of elemental.
The problem is there's only so many ways you can do interesting and effective defense in this game.
Right. There's only so much defense that's, plus they made it so you can't avoid hits. So if like a hit happens, I remember that in the game, like they didn't want you to be able to like skirt around it and run around it. So like, it basically just take the hit. So melee damage reduction is really a non-issue in the game. Since most of the damage, like I said, is so telegraphed.
Yeah, if you're dying by melee hits, you're not going to clear that for the other crap you're dealing with in that rift, not because of melee hits.
Right, exactly.
And a lot of the biggest damage hits, even at melee range, are like magical stuff. Like, Shadow Clone Diablo drops that big round bomb thing on the floor, or like Gom with his poison.
Or the Death Maidens and their damn wave of whatever.
Yeah.
Or Mallet.
There's other... I mean, the one time I died this season was from the other, that one... Rift Guardian, the Flyer, who does that little Nova nuke at close range.
Yeah.
And that killed me because I was already low. That one-shotted me, but of course that wasn't a melee attack. Obviously, I wasn't using a mutilation guard anyway.
Right.
Well, maybe
I would have deserved to die if I'd been using a mutilation guard. That was at melee range. He killed me after he teleported to me from off screen, and then he just cast that when he was right on top of me, just immediately when he appeared. Obviously, it wasn't part of his skill set, but it just kind of worked out that way. But yeah, so I don't know what they can do with Mutilation Guard, unless they made it damaged, like a reverse Zaze or something. Like, it does more protection from closer attacks. It'd be really complicated to figure that out, though, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
That would, a reverse Zaze would be amazing, but, then it would just... I'm finding even now, like, as you start to push higher, it's not damage, really, that's not allowing you to push. It's survivability, so...
Yeah.
Just die too much, man.
Yeah, really, everything.
You play hardcore, Muggs? Me either.
Yeah. Hardcore.
Okay, so any other thoughts on Legendary Gems? Oh, I have one thing about. I want to talk about a little bit of followers in Legendary Gems. Any other general thoughts? Are there any other ones that are offensive ones that just no one uses and they have obvious buffs to make them better?
Mirane is one that nobody uses anymore. It was really popular back when like the Akon set was like the best set for satyrs. So way back when, I think pre-seasons. So that was a really popular one.
I'd like Wreath of Lightning to be better, or like if they found some way to like make Wreath of Lightning usable for at least like a lightning build for a wizard, like scale with lightning damage or something, because then it'd be interesting to make like a T10 like lightning wizard build where you just run around shocking everything permanently.
Yeah, that was everybody's favorite gem when they first announced them, like when conduit shrines were like the most powerful thing. We're like, ooh, we can have a conduit shrine all the time. It's like, yeah, but it won't do anything.
Yeah, and it's like carved.
Well, all right then.
Well, they did buff it, but yeah, no, it definitely needs... You run that, people run Wreath of Lightning with Boon of the Hoarder just to go really fast. That's
or when you do a new character, if you're just racing through stuff.
Yeah.
I'd like to see... Ooh. Sorry, I'm looking at gems and just blurting shit out, but the Ice Blink gem. What if they change... So Ice Blink, cold skills now apply chill effects to... in your chill effects, slow enemies' movements by an additional 5%, and that's what levels. And then enemies chilled have a 10% increased chance to be critically hit. What if they changed it to, instead of 10% crit chance, 100% crit damage?
It's just a math problem.
Yeah, it's almost the same. The nice thing about Ice Blink, even though people don't run it very often, is it applies to the group. So if one person's running Ice Blink, everybody gets 10% to crit. And everybody likes 10% to crit, So...
I like that gem. I think it's cool. I think a little tweak to the damage. Like I just feel like that at the higher level... You'd appreciate critical hit damage more than critical hit chance.
Well, I think it depends, because if you're dual wielding, then you want critical hit chance. If you're using one hand and an offhand, then you want critical hit damage. So it really depends on which. Yeah, see, for a wizard, you want critical hit damage, but for a barb and for a monk, it's definitely critical hit. That makes it better.
Then it's just a math problem.
Right.
Blizzard tries to avoid that kind of thing. It's like, is it better to have CCCH or CDC? Or
that's the whole game, though. Is it better to have CCCH or
Well,
CHD?
obviously you need both, but yeah.
Well, not for the Satyr. That's one of the cool things about playing the Thorn Satyr. It's like you don't use crit, attack speed, or critical hit damage at all in the entire build. So it's like it's kind of refreshing to like not have to look for those stats on gear, or like look for a piece of gear that would normally be super shitty. And you're like, God, that's a shitty piece of gear. You're like, oh, that is awesome for my lawn satyr. So,
Well, Well, because they know people who play Crusaders can't do math, so they had to simplify the game a lot.
Exactly.
Make most of the mods not matter.
Oh, that one's for Leviathan out there.
Yeah, right.
So. Crusaders like the iPhone of Diablo 3. That's a metaphor. So one other random question about gems. I'm wondering, obviously, legendary gems do not work on followers. They have no function if you give them to them. What if they did? What if they could use one? Like, say they put a socket in the special follower item. The legendary special item each follower can only use one of, and that was a legendary gem. Damn near none of them are would even use. I mean, I guess the efficacious toxin or Bane of the Trap.
Efficacious toxin would be the best. Or Bane of the Trap for demon hunters, so you always have that slow. And then efficacious everybody would go for the 10% damage buff. Or Ice Blink.
Yeah, or 10%
to crit.
Problem is, the Ice Blink would have to trigger off the follower actually hitting something, and they don't hit shit. So.
Well, my follower, I always stack up as much attack speed as possible, so they attack like madmen. So they're constantly pulling stuff.
They're not exactly casting, firebomb on the entire screen. I mean, that's good against a single target, but.
Well, I don't know. I give them a thunder.
You'd rather have 10% damage to everything from efficacious toxin, I would think. But.
Right? Yeah. I mean, it's like you said. It's a math problem. Do I want 10% more to crit, or do I want 10% total damage? That's effective by dibs. So
if you got Osmodeus back on the show, if you're going to do math problems, he's an accountant. Accountants like math. So that's obviously if the gem benefited the Crusader. What if the follower, Crusader follower, same thing pretty much, right? What if the gem benefited you? I mean, it's just like you're getting a fourth legendary gem, so it's kind of a pointless topic, but it just been rolling around forever. I'm trying to. But it doesn't make any sense. Like, what if it had to trigger also? Like, it only triggers if they actually hit something and be stupid.
Well, I mean, another one that would be kind of neat on a follower, even if it only worked for the follower, would be Taeguk.
Yeah.
Because then the follower would attack more, which would give you more pulls with Esud Johan, and it would lower their cooldown, so then they would be able to heal you or cast their spells or charm stuff or whatever follower you happen to be having more often. Because CDR does work on followers. So
Is there any world where you could use legendary gems on followers and you would therefore choose to use follower unique items that were not the one that just makes them not be able to die?
Well, that's a big thing. I don't even understand what the point of those other follower items are. Because, you cannot...
They're to use before you find the one that lets them not die.
Yeah, I mean...
and then once you find that, you never use them again.
They need to... That's something they need to revamp. They need to just make all followers not die, and then give us cool things in their items, so, to make it more interesting, reduces the cooldown of all the follower skills. That'd be kind of something interesting. You can't run that at all. Even in T10, your follower will die. So I don't understand the point of that.
I like how your comment is even in T10. Like even on as easy a level as T10, they still die.
Well, I mean, but that's
T10 was a high level.
So T10 is a G45, and if people are doing G80 solo, I mean, they can't even, they're going to die 40 levels below. I don't even think it's T6 viable. I've never actually taken it, but I know for a fact it doesn't work in T10. So.
Yeah, I mean, those are their legendary follow items are just a joke. I mean, they're useless, but he'll cast his useless skill. I mean, they do have some pretty powerful CC attacks and stuff, turning things into chickens or stunning everything when they hit them. But it doesn't never compares to how about you just never die instead, so.
Right, you just never want to die.
But I mean, can you imagine if the other follower legendary items were so powerful it made it worth it trying to put a defensive legendary gem on your follower to keep them alive so they could do this other thing more often? No, of course not. No one would ever do that.
No.
I
can't. I mean, I guess, but I mean, a 50% reduction is not. I mean, so I'm going to get healed, once every 6 seconds versus once every 10 seconds, and then.
But I really
can get chickens every 10 seconds.
Chickens are fun.
I mean,
chickens
they're great.
Fun.
Yeah, I mean, I like them, but they're not
Okay, so moving on to our podcast portion, talking a little bit about the past podcast, a little bit of intro to this. Do you recall when you were first on the podcast, Aahz? Had you listened to other podcasts before? What made you decide you wanted to be a speaking voice on the internet?
I was well into it, or well into the series, but I think you had one of those call-outs. I can't remember. It was probably after Reaper of Souls. It might have been before. But, yeah, what I remember is there were a couple of podcasts where I was with guys who hadn't played Diablo in a while, And that gave me the courage that, well, I can surely do better than those guys because I'm at least playing the game. So that's what it took for me to actually volunteer.
What about the ones where the host hasn't played Diablo for a while?
That's okay. You're the host. See,
Oh,
that's fine.
The rules don't apply to me.
You just got to MC and move the conversation along.
Awesome. I'm like Blizzard. I don't actually know what I'm doing in the playing the game. I just make the game. Yeah, so we started this back in April of 2011, and I had listened to podcasts fairly often. I was listening to Bill Simmons, the sports guy. He used to have podcasts on forever. I enjoyed a lot of his and some other sports ones and some pop culture ones. I wasn't listening to any gaming ones, and all I really thought about at the time of gaming people was that was kind of the early days where streamers were starting to get popular. And the problem, I mean, some streamers are very interesting, and there's some YouTube guys that have a billion subscribers and stuff. But whenever I would try to watch a streamer or listen to him, it was just sort of this guy rambling, like the joke we'd always make was streamer of consciousness. It's like stream of consciousness, but streamer of consciousness. Sure. Where the guy's like, oh, and then you go over, oh, yeah, I'm going to respec some of these things, and yeah, I was at the store. And it's like sort of this monotone, grumbling for 6 hours nonstop. Like a car ride with grandma.
And yet they're immensely popular.
I don't understand children. You should all be ashamed of yourselves. But it's like, it's like driving to the Grand Canyon with your grandparents, and they're in the front seat. Yeah, that time we went to the market when Barg and Bessie, and I remember that. No, we had salsa that night. No, I don't tell them what to have for dinner, woman. Blah blah blah. Something I'm doing chef's parents. But I was like, I don't want to talk like that. I don't want to just ramble on endlessly and have nothing to say about this stuff. I want actual conversations. Or else it was you would just see, straight Q&A, Tell us about the new items in the game, Jay. Well, let me tell you about the time I was at the Loch Ness Monster. And it was just not a useful conversational piece. But and Paul and Ellie kept, Rush and Ellie, running our Ink Gamers back in the day and, doing their own podcasts occasionally. We're like, we should do a podcast. All the kids do podcasts. It's a cool thing. It's a way you'll enjoy it. And I didn't want to do it. I'm like, okay, I don't want to hear. I was still in the phase where you hear your voice on a phone, on an answering machine, and you're like, what the hell is that sound? Like a dog seeing his reflection in a mirror and realizing it's another dog or thing. And I'm like, my voice sounds horrible. I'd have to find something like this on time. Definitely a early podcast, a sense of speak more slowly, articulate, which I often fall out of, especially when I'm on my second glass of wine, which is like right now. And as a matter of fact, it's a really nice Syrah, though, so it's okay. But
I like those. It's
just weird to hear yourself talk, and editing the podcast early on was torture. Hearing myself, I'm like, that voice is awful. I should talk better. But of course, you do, hear yourself and improve a little bit. And they eventually talked me into trying one. And the first few we did, people were like, "Oh, these are great. We really like this. You should do more." I'm like, "Okay." And here we are, damn near 5 years later, on episode 200.
We're still saying that, man. Still enjoy listening to them.
Do you recall listening to the first one you were on, Oz? And did you think, what is wrong with me? Why do I sound so stupid? Or
completely. I was like, I still don't think I sound very good, but yeah, it's not your voice because you're used to hearing your voice from inside your head, right? When you hear it out in the real world, it's like, that's not me.
Other people hear this all the time?
I know. Why doesn't anybody talk to me? I sound terrible. They should be running, screaming from this.
Luckily, they all have the exact same reaction when they hear themselves talk, so.
Yeah, but some people never discover that.
Yeah. At least not so forcefully.
Right.
Yeah, and obviously, I mean, I don't know if you've listened to shows and thought, I should talk more clearly or put more. One of the things I realized early on is I'm always very sarcastic and droll of wit and stuff, or at least I try to be, as I'm sure listeners have noticed. But I was talking in this really monotone voice, and you couldn't tell when I was being sarcastic or not because I had this flat tone. And the first few shows, I'm like, this is why people who don't know me don't get my sarcasm in real life. You've got to put more inflection in your voice and talk happy and make big noises like a Jim Carrey movie. And look at this. And then when you do some sarcasm, it actually stands out that you're being deadpan. So that's an advice for real life as well. It definitely, I think it's actually helped my communication skills in real life to some extent.
Yeah, I don't work that hard. I just go deadpan the whole time, so it's easier.
And you never use sarcasm, so it's fine.
Never.
Ba-dum-ba. Yeah, so that was something I noticed in the early days, and communication skills. And after you do, I don't know how many it took for you to hear. I don't know if you still listen to the ones you're on, Oz, but
I do. I'm that egotistic. I admit it.
Oh, there you go. Do you masturbate while listening?
No.
Okay, it's not that bad then.
Play too much, then we'll go.
Yeah, exactly. But if you played too much of the old monk set, you'd have to. You'd have no choice, right? Your hand would be curled up helplessly, like my left foot. That was a movie, not a reference to my actual foot, but you can take it either way you want.
I like the way you play the piano.
That's what she said. And so after about 10 episodes, I stopped noticing. It's like, my voice is it's just one of the voices on the podcast, and if something stupid comes out, I'll edit it out. And definitely the guests have improved over time. People have been on the while. One of our early guests, I don't want to name names, but he used to, every question I would ask, he would basically spend the first 30 seconds restating the question, kind of like thinking aloud, and then he would answer the question. So I had to do so much editing on these early shows, because it was, he would make good points once he started talking, but I would think, so have you played any Crusader lately? Have I played any Crusader? Well, the Crusader's kind of that class where, like, the sword and the shield is a little bit different than the other classes, and then he would get into, like 20 seconds of that every question. And I would just cut it out every time. And I'm like, this is just death. It's you listening, like, start talking. So there are people, some guests have areas, and some hosts, I'm sure as well, have areas where they get into the same things, and you just go, okay, I'm just going to delete 5 minutes here. This is just, it can be improved by editing.
But that, like, quintuples the time it takes for you to finish a podcast. If you have to do that much editing, I would think.
Yeah, I don't care anymore. I just let them roll. I don't give a fuck. Yeah, I'm getting paid for this shit, so whatever, right? But
Here.
I do still delete a little bit of stuff sometimes. We have some off-topic things, or if there's there's a 10-second pause, or we have tech problems or something. I do actually. I'm gonna have to put together that bullet list. I always. I usually when I listen to a podcast, it's while I'm cooking or doing housework or in the car, and I'm not jumping around. But I imagine people do listen to them, and I try to make a list. At least every 5 minutes or so. Here's the new topic if you want to jump to the part you like or something like that. And I appreciate that when I see that on other podcasts. Yeah, sorry. What were you saying?
Said we had a football discussion that was edited out of the last one, which rightly so, by the way.
Yeah, Super Bowl, detour or something. And if there's some big laugher, but that's one of the things that I have in my notes here. I was thinking about this at work this morning when I had some free time before it got really busy. I work at I've mentioned on the podcast before, but I work weekends in a tasting room here, and this is Valentine's weekend. So, as you might guess, like every MFer and his ugly girlfriend go wine tasting on Valentine's Day. Yeah. And it's like really busy. So I had a really busy day at work. I had lunch at about 6:30 today. So yeah, I got home and had the soup I taken to work, and I had time to warm it up on when I got home. People are breaking glasses, dropping wine on the floor today. It was chaos. I'm like, I should get paid better for this bullshit. But anyway, that's kind of what happens when you're doing the podcast thing and you get all super into it.
Right.
But one of the points I had noticed is that I like conversations, and the podcasts I liked, not to mention Bill Simmons again, but he was certainly doing a lot of podcasts. I liked the one when he had 2 or 3 people, and it was like a really good conversation, digressions. Someone gets off into some side topic, and like you were just saying, sometimes we digress on things, especially during the intro, when we're kind of chatting, getting warmed up. And sometimes they're really funny, and I'll leave that in, but usually it's totally off topic, talking about the Super Bowl or some bullshit like that.
Sure.
And it just doesn't, it doesn't need to be in the show. It's a Diablo 3 podcast. But I do like when we digress into different topics and, someone goes, oh, by the way, this is wizard skill that's driving me crazy, and they go off on that, as opposed to staying, like, I don't have, I have 5, 6, 8, 10 talking points we want to get into on the show, but often we don't get to them all, or you guys will digress from one, you'll segue from one to the other, and I'm like, well, we'll just talk about that now, because that was in my notes for later, but who cares, right?
Yeah, like an obscure chess piece into the set dungeon rant.
which is now your trademark.
Sweet.
Are you looking forward to getting your hardcore character disconnected last time you play a 4-player Rift?
It's in my mission to get set dungeons removed from the game. I have to lobby harder.
You're paying the price for all of us.
How much would it cost to bribe the next president to get that through Congress?
Donald Trump's already rich. Exactly. One other thing I was going to mention for one of the talking points, kind of some of the highlights of the podcast, which we're not going to have time to do on the show because I've been so goddamn windy on other things, but is that right before Diablo 3 launched, I was sending a bunch of emails to Blizzard, over like a couple of months, every couple of weeks I'd send them and say, I really want to interview some of the devs, even just one of them, not about the game, just talk about the process of making it, how was the beta test compared to what you expected, not like, give me the stats for the new Azure Wrath, That was, for years and years during development, every interview was only good if you got new information.
Right.
And if, they'd go to Gamescom and they talk to some guy from, Wired or something, and every question's like, so, is the Necromancer coming back? And you would just, like, tear your fucking eyeballs out.
Yeah.
Because it's like, wasted opportunity, wasted question. There'd be one good question in a 10-question interview, and they would just give these real, PR-friendly, formulaic answers. And after years of that, I was like, okay, the game's coming out now. We're not trying to get any info. I just want to chat. How did you get into ARPGs, Jay? What do you like working on this? How did it compare to what you expected? What did you guys learn on the beta? How do you do with fan feedback? No gotcha questions. Just have kind of a conversation, which they had never had any of those, at least not publicly to that point.
Mm-hmm.
Were you going to jump in there a second ago with something else?
I was going to say, you would think that they would want to have those types of conversations because it gives them a chance to talk about the process and what they iterate on, what they don't. We see more of those now at the conventions and such, but
yeah,
there was. I agree that they weren't doing a lot of that early on.
And the interviews they did were really 10, 12 questions, just real Q&A. Tell us, how are unique items going? Well, unique items are a special feature. It was just this Mr. Voice. It always reminded me of when you see like bad movie trailers and they have that Mr. Voice, and it's always like, in a land far away, a young man rises to power. There's like 10 seconds of clips of like dragons in slow motion and bullshit. And a land torn by fear. You can almost narrate it before you even hear the guy talking. It's so formulaic. And that was what all the interviews were like forever. And I said, we were for like podcast 80 or something at that point when the game was coming out. And I just want to chat with some of these MFers, have some interesting conversation. Here they got into it and stuff. And Lyleria was the head. Bashiak had already left at that point. Lyleria was the head person of Diablo 3 community manager, and she'd say, "Oh, that's an awesome idea. We'd love to do it. Let me try to get the schedule and get back to you." And then there's 2 weeks of tumbleweeds blowing past and crickets chirping. And I'd email again and say, "Hey, any thoughts about this? I'd love to talk about this. Here's some recent stuff that came out. It'd be fun to get their thoughts on, after this." "Oh, that sounds awesome. We should totally do that." And I don't think she was lying to me. I thought she did think it sounded awesome. And, she wasn't getting approval from people higher up in PR, or we had just gotten unblackballed at that point. We were on their 08 and 09, we were on their good list. We got invited to the, Rush and Ellie got invited to the Worldwide Invitational in Paris where they announced Diablo 3. Mm-hmm. And we got, like, red carpet treatment at Blizzcon 08 and 09. They paid for hotels for us, and they gave us all kinds of perks. And then suddenly in the middle of, like, early 2010, we just never heard anything again for, like, 18 months.
So probably a different corporate strategy, or?
I don't know. It was still Bashiak, and like he'd respond to my emails and say, "Sorry, I can't answer your questions on this." And, we never got any explanation. It wasn't like, "Hey, you asked a rude question, so we don't like you anymore." Nothing changed. We didn't do anything different. And just suddenly it's like, we're going to not respond to anything, and we're not going to tell you anything. No BlizzCon passes. I paid my own way to BlizzCon 2010. And then suddenly, like, right before the game came out, they started talking to us again. They had like a new PR initiative. I got invited to Blizzard North as part of a Fansite summit in the summer of 2012, actually. It was after the game came out.
Yeah, I remember that.
And that was in the podcast little thing we're not going to get to today because I've talked too much. But it was we never got any explanation why or why not. It was just like, hey, we're talking to you again, And I think partially it was because there was such a, the game was so bad upon release in so many ways, so they lost tons and tons of fans. So they had, well, these guys have been doing this for 15 years, and sometimes they have their own opinions and mention botting, but, we gotta get what we can do. So.
I mean, to be fair, I don't think you'd mention botting to that point.
There wasn't any botting at that point.
There was gold botting.
No one cared.
No one cared. Well, that was before when the auction was still up.
Yeah, we did talk about that stuff, but I mean, before launch, I was talking to Lyleria again, so we were getting chances for interviews and stuff, but. And she just kept saying that'd be great, we'd love to do it, and then nothing ever happens. And that's happened repeatedly over the past, 4 years. We'll send all these ideas, hey, we should do this, it'd be great to do this. And they'll say, that sounds great, we should do that. And then it never happens with us. And then they're on, 4-hour, co-host podcasting with some, notorious botter. And it's like, well, the notorious BOT, right? So
he's bringing more eyeballs.
Forever ago, it would be like, well, you guys are such a busy fan site that we want to try to support some of the smaller fan sites that aren't so well used and so many views. And now it's like we didn't do so many updates for a while, and streamers are more popular. Well, we want to go with the streamers because they have a bigger audience. It's like somehow no matter the cases, we get fucked. It seems like just like the anti-Valentine's Day.
Yeah. Yep. It just sounds to me like there was turnover either in legal or community or whatever, and they decided to go in a different direction.
That sounds like the kind of answer they would give.
Who knows?
We're pursuing a different direction.
But that stuff, I'm telling you, that stuff happens in the real world.
Yeah.
If you work for companies, you see it.
We had a really good relationship with Blizzard North back in forever ago, and we just sort of went around Blizzard PR the whole time. And of course, Blizzard North ended in 2003, so that went away.
We know how Jay Wilson feels about them.
But then Diablo, yeah, there are certain former heads of the company.
Yep.
But what happened is there were some longtime Blizzard PR employees and other people who we had somewhat acrimonious relationships with based on WoW and StarCraft and other games. It wasn't about Diablo 3. Like a certain well-known former Blizzard website developers might have been banned from our forums in the past, just hypothetically speaking, because they were not following the forum rules and being annoying. But so they might have harbored grudges for a decade or two. But anyway, so podcast stuff. I'd like to have a conversation. Anyway, what was funny about that is then right when Diablo 3 launched, like the day or 2 or 3 days after it came out, like 10 new interviews appeared. And it was like all the audio developers went and talked to like some audio website, and like graphics guys talked to like graphics websites. It wasn't like, major gaming sites. It was like all these obscure stuff. I remember there was like a whole music thing. Like Russell Brower did this huge long interview with some like music site. And the developers, there was something like a Jay Wilson had like a 40-minute conversation with some guy on like a German radio shy, some weird things. And it was exactly the goddamn conversation I've been pitching them on for 3 months. I remember being so pissed about that. And the problem was that, one, I had been asking for this for months, and they kept blowing me off and then did it with other people. And two, they posted these like the day after the game came out. So nobody listened anyway.
Yeah.
It was like, this is just a PR masterpiece here.
And they were just trying to probably say, oh, well, everybody who's on the fan sites already knows the game's coming out, so we'll promote the game in these other places for people who don't know that it's coming out.
Which is certainly a valid discussion and choice, and they know the fan sites will cover all this bullshit anyway. But of course, we weren't paying attention to it because the game was out, and there were all these like inside baseball conversations that no one else cared about on general gaming sites unless they cared about Diablo 3.
I didn't listen to any of them.
Exactly. I didn't even listen to any of them. I was looking at news posts. It was just like we were doing 20 news posts a day after the game came out.
Yep.
And it's like, here's the interviews roundup, and there's like 9 interviews we would have drug your mother through broken glass to listen to 6 months before that, when there was no news for 4 months at a time, And now there's an absolute glut of it, and it's all at once, and it's completely wasteless. So that was the whole conversation thing. Just do a few of the milestones here. Go up to like show 50 just to get some of this covered today, and I'll ask you for your feedback on some of these. Hitting them quickly. The first show ever I mentioned earlier, we interviewed Max Schaefer, Blizzard North employee. We couldn't get any. We'd love to do Blizzard guys, but again, they were like, "What's a podcast?" And we don't want to talk to you because we don't like you. Anyway, probably not. But anyway, the first interesting one I thought was episode 5. That was the first time we ever entered the show with Mad Cow sound effects.
Aha.
And to be totally honest, that is still the best part of the show 195 episodes later. Every show when I edit this, I don't know if you guys listening enjoy the ending. We always do that.
Of course we do.
I'm always editing it. I edit it. I have a separate file for the open intro and outro music, and I have to kind of layer it over there with a little bit of a fade in. And I usually end up doing fart jokes and stuff for the last few minutes, and I cut some of that stuff out. I never cut out the moo part because that is always the best part.
Indeed.
And I love to just lay the music on and have it slowly rising up, that whatever the hell that theme music is that no one's heard in 20 years because they don't have the sound on in the game, and listen to Anthrax instead. Okay, no one listens to Anthrax instead.
It's a good feature of the podcast, the mooing.
And if I had time today at work, I would have gone back and listened at how it came about on that show. But somehow we got into the, I'm sort of mentioning the Diablo 2 Secret Cow level and got into the mooing, and that's become, of course, the trademark if anyone ever listens to the end of the podcast. Maybe they assume most podcasts, like the last 5 minutes, they just ask you to like subscribe on iTunes and stuff. So you just end up stopping it and going to do something else. But I don't bother because I don't give a shit about iTunes, to be perfectly honest with you, or subscription numbers. But ours is worth listening to the end because you get the mooing.
Yes, it is.
And we'll probably do that here in about 10 minutes, hopefully. The other funny thing about episode 5, I noticed, this is from like May 2011, so obviously it was some announcement from Blizzard at that point. The news on that one was how item sets in Diablo 3 would scale up over time, so you wouldn't just find them at level 45 or whatever and have them be a dead level. And Blizzard, I remember, was very concerned about how item sets were no fun if you only use them in the end game, and they should be something you find all along. And they had all these crazy ideas about how you could like find like item set crafting recipes and make them every 10 or 15 levels, so you could keep using the same set forever. Yeah, that didn't really work out that way, did it, Aahz?
I never found set items. I don't even remember what the first set item I found was. I remember seeing all these, Guild stuff on the auction house, and I was like, where do you get these? And then found out later, oh, it's a set plan, which I certainly never found a set plan until they buffed the drop rate. So, that what a great idea. You should find sets all along, except you should never, ever find a legendary item, let alone a set.
Yeah, and they had this idea that it was no fun to have sets only in the end game, and of course now like every set worth using is only in the end game. So
True.
it's funny how it worked out. But just moving along, episode 9 was a couple of months later. They had just announced the follower system, and people were pissed because you would only get followers in single-player games. And I had totally forgotten that this existed, till skimming this stuff. But of course in Diablo 2 you had followers all the time.
And they were powerful.
And they were overpowered with these super orb items once they got those in the game.
Yep.
But, there was all this concern about followers all through development. Will they be good enough? Will they be too weak? Will they matter? Does it matter in single player? And I gotta say, I guess they did a pretty good job on that. I mean, I was skeptical of the whole single player only thing, but they are a useful companion in multi and single player. There are a few nice buffs on them. They have some nice item effects, but none of them are so powerful that it like overpowers the game. I think the only thing that really makes a real difference is there's the amulet that makes the it curses them, so they become I'm forgetting what the term is for it that the game uses. It's one of the amulets you got out of
Overwhelming Desire.
Yeah, and it makes the monster take way more damage. And of course the one dagger that makes them freeze below 20% hit points.
Yun Jung Do or
those
whatever,
make a big difference. But do you really notice? I mean, if you're playing solo, when someone joins your game and your follower goes away, does it really make a difference in any of your builds or play styles?
No, not really. Now, again, before they added these toughness items in, it was a big deal when you were trying to push and you had to have the double unity.
Yeah,
but
of course.
Since then, it's really not a big difference. But I guess I'm fine with them going a different way and saying these are going to be a nice buff, but they're not going to actually do damage. I'm fine with the direction they took on those. They did fine, and there are some useful items. Essa Johan, I like finding that, putting it on the Merc. That really helps.
Yeah, that one's helpful. And I will notice it if someone joins my game, or if someone wants a power level, and then you lose that little bit more regen from the Templar I usually have going.
True.
And suddenly I'll notice that my build's not quite working as well as it was. Usually you have just enough regen to do whatever you're doing. And now suddenly you have, 5% less total regen or something. But it's not a big deal. I think they did work out pretty well. Much less than our hysteria back in 2011 was going to indicate. Another funny one, episode 11, it was in June 2011. That was when we first started talking about guilds and clans in Diablo 3.
Ooh.
And the main guest on that podcast, one of the main guests was Nineball, who was on podcasts from the early days and now does his own podcast.
Nice.
And he, of course, was a big-time WoW player, so he used to always pick his brain about any feature in Diablo 3 that was originating in WoW. And we were assuming that they would take all these lessons from how clans and guilds worked in WoW and use them in D3. And that's pretty much LOL in retrospect, right?
Yeah.
We didn't get clans in the...
while to implement it.
When did clans come into D3? Like in 2013? I mean...
Sounds right.
And really, clans are just like an enhanced friends list at this point,
Yeah.
I mean, are you enjoying your clan bank and your clan item trading and your clan special features?
Your guild house where you can, put
Yeah,
all
your
the
special
items
guild house hangout, you can customize it, and like you can give
Yeah.
people guild points, and like there's recruitment bonuses. Oh wait, none of these things exist. So yeah,
It's useful, but the main thing it did for me was I didn't have to go to public games anymore.
Yeah,
Which is, that's good and bad, I suppose.
but it's just a big friends list, I mean, I'm obviously
Agreed.
I'm running a clan, and you're in the same clan, and it's nice to have 130 people. Obviously they're not all online except for the first day of a season, but
It's nice.
it gives you a sense of community, and you see, there's some chat going on and stuff. I mean, I'm not saying they're bad, but it's just funny that we were in 2011. We're all like obsessed. How are these going to work? And it's like, it's going to be a while, guys. Just
Yeah.
put your horse back in the barn.
True.
Another amusing one was episode 16 in June 22, 2011, which is right after my birthday, so I must have been very excited about that. We had a discussion about why there are no successful Diablo clones. What magic did Diablo... And I don't mean Diablo clones like you see in the game. I mean... they used to always say, why aren't there any other Diablo killers? There were all these other ARPGs, and they always sucked. They went away quickly. Torchlight wasn't bad, but it never really caught on with a big community base like that. And we were all discussing on this show, what magic did Diablo 2 have, and why was it so hard to repeat it? And then, of course, we had a year of Diablo 3 that basically sucked, so it was really hard to recreate. And now I would say that pretty much everyone playing the game would agree Diablo 3 has recaptured that, and it's really a Diablo 2 killer. And also we have Path of Exile, which many, many people enjoy a lot, and it's stuck around.
Haven't played it.
But obviously you are aware that it has a pretty large fan base, that people think it's a great game, and it's been successful over time.
Okay.
Torchlight and Torchlight 2 are both pretty good games, but none of them had, the long-lasting impact, and there have been plenty of other ones of similar nature. So apparently it's not impossible to make a good ARPG other than Diablo 2, since we have 2 that exist right now, or at least 1.5.
Yeah, I don't know. I never really sought those out. I went more to the CRPG Baldur's Gate, Oblivion, Skyrim. I went to those instead of another ARPG.
Okay, you're off the podcast. No, whatever, it's fine. Another interesting thing, episode 24 was in July 2011. Another funny thing is, look at these numbers. Number 16 was on June 22nd. Number 24 was in mid-July. So we were doing like 3 a week for a while back in the days. 2 and 3 a week all the time. We did
Lots of news back then.
We did 53 the first year, and we started in April. So give you a sense. A lot more than 1 a week at that point. Now we've gotten lazy. It's 1 a week at best. If I can get out of bed, gotta spit the bonbons out of my mouth and get off the pillows and everything.
But there's not a constant stream of news or anything anymore. So I think the cadence is probably about right at 1 a week.
Yeah, the first year we went up to the beta and stuff, and then the next year was in the beta and launch. So we obviously had a lot of content in those days.
Yep.
Anyway, the big thing in July of 2011 was that Blizzard had just announced that there would be long cooldowns on some of the skills up to 2 minutes, which seemed unimaginable. I mean, the longest skill cooldown in D2 was like 3 seconds on Hydra.
Right.
So we couldn't even imagine how much of a skill that only lasted 2 minutes. And of course, when the game came out, there actually were 2-minute cooldowns. You didn't have cooldown reduction gear, you didn't have special items. You'd cast Ancients for the Barbarian, and then 2 minutes later you'd cast Ancients again. It's like, okay. And of course now the whole push is to find gear that will completely reduce all cooldowns to nothing. So, which most of us have at this point. So. Right. Yeah. On the big buff skill. Except for Archon. You can't have permanent Archon anymore. That's out. Next patch. we gotta find a way for Wizards to hit GR 120 solo, so that'll be coming up. But it is funny to think back. There was a day when any kind of a cooldown more than 5 seconds seemed insane. Like, how could you have that in a Diablo game? And now it's like every damn half the skills in the game have a minute-long cooldown. So at least that's what it says on the tooltip. Your mileage will probably vary, right?
Probably. It's on gear and on, obviously the specific pieces of gear that significantly reduce the skill.
Exactly, and you should have all of those, or you're a noob.
And Obzod.
Or you're a filthy casual. Obzod, indeed. Another interesting next point, August 2011, show 30, I interviewed the lead developer of Path of Exile, which you played a lot of Oz and are really a fan of the game. And his name is Chris Wilson. And somehow I never noticed, his name was Wilson? Wilson! So somehow both Diablo 2 clones under development at the same time in 2011 had a lead developer named Wilson.
Isn't that the neighbor from Home Improvement?
It was the volleyball in a Tom Hanks movie, that's all I know.
Okay.
And who would have thought, years later, that of these two developers named Wilson, the one whose name has become an enduring punchline was not the guy making his first game ever working out of his garage in New Zealand.
True. Well, it was a rough launch.
As far as we know, Chris Wilson has never doubled anything.
Maybe not.
Except his name recognition. Okay, a couple more of these before we move on here. August 2011, number 32, we had an ethical debate about the real money auction house that had just been announced in August of that year, that there was not just an auction house, but it would involve real money. And at the time, there was this huge debate. I mean, I remember 5-6 years before that, like the idea of spending real money for anything in a game was just heresy and seemed so wrong. And that's only in Asian RPGs, and like we don't do that in any Western RPGs or games, and it's cheating. And then, opinions changed quickly. We started getting all kinds of downloadable content and stuff. Mm-hmm. Do you recall back in the day, Oz, when any kind of money for the game was cheating, and then how did that sort of change over time?
I wasn't really following a lot of the news back then, honestly, but you could see it. Was Facebook? Facebook was probably a big. Those types of games moved the needle on what.
Yeah, all those Mafia Wars and Farmville and shit.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. But you're right. There was a time when you thought, why would I spend more money? I spent $60 on this game. And somehow we morphed to spend $60 on the game and spend, $40 every 2 years.
I'm pretty sure you have in the past stated your happiness. You would spend real money on more stash tabs tomorrow.
That is absolutely true.
You would almost move to China to be able to spend more money on stash tabs. Where in fact
I haven't looked at that yet.
Where you would in fact have that option if you were in China today on D3. And we've had multiple votes on this, and now people are like, I I would take stash for cash right now in the game. I would happily spend money for more stash tabs and more character slots and stuff.
My other theory is, this is a technical issue, they can just do that for hardcore, where you need more stash space anyway, because there's a lot fewer players, right? Lower player base, so less stress on your servers.
Do we know if the servers are segregated that way?
I have no idea. But I'm just saying the player base is a lot less. So if you rolled it out to just a hardcore, it wouldn't affect, the load by having all the player base do it.
And plus, hardcore players are really not into pack ratting. We all just kind of easy come, easy go. We don't save extra gear at all, so there'd be plenty of space anyway.
That's
no problems.
True. Probably I could get rid of one of my, 4 elusive rings that are sitting there that I don't use in any of my builds. But you never know when somebody's going to come up with a build with one of those, right?
Yeah, that's what Blizzard says. You can put it in the cube now, though, and it'll be good there forever.
True.
The funny thing about that episode 32 is I had mentioned at the start that I'd never had. I was going to say, I don't think we got to mentioning it here live, but in my notes I was going to say we never had any lost shows, like recorded a show and decided we couldn't post it because there were too many Jay Wilson jokes or something. Mm-hmm. And then I remember when I was going over this list, I screwed up the first show ever, the Max Schaefer interview. I had never used the recording software before. It recorded for 5 minutes and then cut off.
Oh,
so I actually had to call it.
That's brutal.
I had to go through their PR again and talk to Max the next week again. He was nice enough to do it all again. But I think in that case it was an improvement because the first one ever, I had done interviews in person, but never on the phone, never on Skype.
Right.
And I think I talked way too fast and talked over his answers and kept digressing. And I think I did a much better job having a second go at it when I could kind of. And plus there were some topics that I thought he would go for and he didn't go for, so I just kind of cut those out of the rerun.
True.
The other one that happened was on this ethical debate about the RMAH, and I had totally forgotten until looking at it. I remember I think my hard drive locked up entirely, and I actually lost a whole hard drive the day after that show. And it was all lost. I had to redo the whole thing. And the debaters on that one were Wolfpack, who is still on the show occasionally, was the pro. He wanted to buy stuff with money because he's a bad person. And there was some other guy who's never been on the show since named Nico, who was on just that one. And as I recall, there was someone different on the first version of the show in doing the pro argument. And then once I lost the whole thing, it went 2 hours, really spirited debate. I was kind of playing devil's advocate on both sides and presenting all the counterpoints. And they went really well. And then I lost the whole thing on a computer failure. I had to do it again. And the other one guy was like, I can't do that again. I just did that. And so Wolfpack stepped in for the pro side. Or perhaps he bought his way on because he's into buying things for money.
Could be.
But the other guy, Nico, was like, oh, God, I have to do it again. And he was like... And at that point, it was 3 or 4 days after the initial debate, and we had all these forum posts, and there were votes and stuff, and it was 80% people were positive and in favor of the RMT, or at least didn't object to it, And so Nico was like, well, shit, I've already lost the argument, there's been a big debate, and since we first recorded this, all my points, everyone already disagrees with them. I've seen 100 forum posts about this. And so it kind of killed the quality of the show to a fair extent, because, he was making all the same arguments again, and kind of felt like they'd already been debunked or rebutted or whatever. So
was one of his points that the drop rates would have to be so low that it wouldn't be any fun to play? You'd have to buy it on the RMAH?
Probably. I haven't gone and listened to the show. It's episode 32, dude. You can listen to that later when you're running GR60s.
Well, it sounds like he was prescient. I don't think he actually lost the argument.
Yeah. I don't even recall. I think that most people were like, it would be fine to buy this stuff because people would do it anyway, and they might as well cut out the black market. And of course, that happened anyway, and there was still botting, and there was still duping, and there were still black markets. So.
Yep.
Another amusing show right after that was in August 2011, number 34. It was all about the story of Diablo 2. We had just gotten a bunch of information about how the beta was going to be, and it was kind of obviously the early game is fairly scripted. You go into Trisham, you fight at the front gate, you go inside, you go out the back, you go through the Weeping Hollow, etc. Right? Yep. And so it's pretty much our metaphor in the game we were using was cattle shoot. Is it too much like a cattle shoot? You're kind of pushed through this thing. And of course, you know what happens to cattle when they go through cattle chutes, so it's a little bit of an inopportune metaphor, but
it's really more of a killing great.
Exactly, and killing is usually great in Diablo 3. But we had this whole debate about, is the game too scripted? Will it seem too limiting? And of course, today it's when did you last play the story mode? When did you last even think about the story mode in Diablo 3?
Season 4. Once I got up, high paragons for me, I got to that one quest in Act 5 where you can go to the Enchantress's realm and hit the yellow pools. But it's only just to fly through it to get to that point and then stop and not go all the way through.
I think that's cheating.
I haven't done that because of the great, experience boost in Season 5. I haven't done that. I haven't felt any need.
But remember the start of seasons, they were going to make us do a one story mode every season?
I know. I was so relieved when it was kind of at the end, right? That they put adventure mode capability from the start in.
Yeah, that was, I think actually season 1 you had to do story mode first, as I recall. I might be wrong on that, but it was either that or they were going to make us do it. We're like, please God, no.
It seems like the first release of news, it was going to be story mode first, and then you could do it. But I think they changed that even before season 1.
Yeah, but way back in August of course, D3 Vanilla after launch, they did loosen that up and let you use any waypoint for a while. But at first it was like you had to go through the whole game again, every act, and then I remember
reset your quest on the game menu.
Every goddamn difficulty level too. It's like, oh shit, I got to do this crap again. Yeah, it was horrible. So it was like Diablo 2 all over again in some ways, but it was just it's been so long since we only had story mode. It's hard to remember how miserable that experience was. Thanks, Jay.
Good.
Thanks, Jay. Speaking of, episode 36, September 2011, just when they announced Inferno difficulty, and that is the source of Jay Wilson's infamous "we doubled it" comment, everyone loved the idea. That was like, the short blurb for the podcast is like, Inferno and why fans are so happy about it was the blurb, or something like that. Once again, showing that fans don't know a goddamn thing about what we actually want in a video game. We were so happy Inferno was going to be there. It's going to be so hard. Finally a challenge. Diablo 2 was too easy. And then a week after release, a day after release, Inferno sucks. Why did you guys make the game so hard?
Yeah. I think I know what they were intending there. That it was only going to be for the, players that really wanted to grind. But since they put it in as like the natural progression, it's had it in the tooltips, right? More challenges await you in Inferno level. That just seemed like, oh no, everybody should go there. And so when it was really, really hard, it wasn't so great for PR.
And we've had this debate in the past, what was wrong with Inferno and stuff. And of course, hard could be fine if you get the tools to surpass hard,
Exactly.
The problem was you couldn't get any items and you were driven into the auction house because the only way you could get the items you needed to pass it, and you couldn't tank anywhere. Remember back when you couldn't find... They had different legendaries that dropped, like in Acts 1, 2, 3, 4, like different qualities. Remember, it was like level 61, 62, 63 for stuff.
Different levels.
And you couldn't get anything better than like a 60 or 61 in Act 1. You had to get to like Act 3 to get 63s, and it was like you couldn't get. It's the old the catch-22. You can't get a job without experience, and you can't get experience without a job, right? So you couldn't get the items without being in Act 3, and you couldn't get to Act 3 without having the items. And it was like, hey, auction house, here we go.
Yeah, that was difficult. And when the game first launched, you could run out of money from repairing items.
Yeah, we're getting into that in a minute. Okay, not on this show, but there's a whole thing about why is there no gold? The economy crisis in Diablo 3. How come we can't get any gold? And then these days, we're getting 250 million per vault. It's like just a laughing. It's absolutely goddamn ridiculous. But that was an issue back in the day, though, man. We were all broke for like the first 6 months, except for the auction house.
Yeah.
Okay, last one we're mentioning on this podcast is number 48. We'll get through like 50 to 100 or more on the next one, and then when we do some more review, assuming there's not some big news item. And if there's no news item, we'll probably get to the whole damn 200 of them because content. 48 was October 2011, just after BlizzCon 2011. I did not attend that one. That was during the beta. I didn't think it was worth it, and they didn't give us a ticket that year anyway. But lots of our readers went, and that was the second year in a row they had a PvP deathmatch demo in BlizzCon, which everyone loved.
The best one in Diablo 3 so far, right?
And the entire podcast on this was about how great the PvP demo was. We had Wolfpack and somebody else who were at the show, and that was all they talked about how awesome it was. They loved the improvements over the 2010 version. And oddly enough, this is actually the last time anybody spoke positively about PvP in Diablo 3. Mark the date, October 2011. Pretty sad, really.
And their reason for going away from that was because they wanted you to use your own gear.
Because Blizzard hates us.
Yeah.
That was the reason.
And those PvP were all like standard set of gear kind of thing, and you actually had to use tactics and group tactics to win.
Yeah, the thing I had forgotten totally is that this comes up a little about 20 or 30 podcasts later, but everything in the PvP was going to be team-based in the early days. It was all either 2v2 or 3v3. And that was how they were going to kind of balance stuff, where, you have strong members on your team and weak members on your team, and it kind of evens it out, as opposed to being the free-for-all style now, where there's certain classes that are just unkillable.
But they have that system now. It's just in Heroes of the Storm.
Yes, exactly. That's the other joke. Could you please stop taking my jokes before I can make my jokes? And I have repeatedly since October 2011 spoken to Jay and other developers and Wyatt and said, why can't we get a PvP deathmatch system with pre-made characters like we had at Blizzcon that was awesome to play? You can just balance the characters that way. You'll never ever balance it with everyone using their own gear. There's too many special items to make massive damage reduction or whatever. Immunities to various things.
True.
And why don't you just make a fun, arcade-style brawler? And they said because they're making Heroes of the Storm and that's going to cost you $10 a month to play. Okay, actually, no, they never said that. They have explicitly said that is not the case and that nothing about Heroes of the Storm impacts upon their Diablo 3 development decisions.
Free to play.
And I have a bridge I would love to sell you if you believe in all these stories.
No thanks.
It's a beautiful bridge, and it goes from Brooklyn to the other side of Brooklyn. And it's really hard to finish painting.
Sounds lovely.
So there was lots of people who are newcomers and don't even think about. When's time even thought about PvP in Diablo 3? I mean, like, you click that brawler NBC by accident once in a while? Is that what it is?
Yeah, I mean, the only time I click them is if I want to try to, clear that little blue asterisk. But since those show up all the time on other
it just comes back.
NPCs, I've given up on it.
It's like the herpes of dialogue prompts. It always just comes back again.
Just comes back. Reappears.
Yeah, so before Diablo 3 came out, we had very high hopes for PvP, and they had spectacularly fun PvP demos in 2011 and 2010 and 2011. I was at the 2010 show, and I did the Demon Hunter was just released, I think, at that show, or Monk, I forget which one. I think it was Demon Hunter was just released at that one. And I played, and I love the Demon Hunter, I love the Archer, I've been waiting to play it, and I played that demo twice, and I played the PvP one about 40 times. Because it was just spectacularly fun going against other people, not playing the monsters. And then once the beta came out, everybody played PvP in 2011, because it was the beta. Anybody who was there who was already playing the game was in the beta test. And the PvP was awesome. It was level 60 characters, which was the max level back in those days, if you can believe it or not. There were all new skills we never used, and it was so fun to find strategies that worked, and the gear that worked, and how you would interact with each other, and team stuff. And it was just awesomely fun, and if they had that on Battle.net, we would also play it today.
Well, in your next 50 shows will be a recurring theme of coming soon, because they didn't give up on that, PvP system. It took them a long time before they finally realized, this is just not going to work.
And they keep saying, we're thinking about it. If we ever get a really great idea, we'll come forward with it and use it, and I don't think it's ever going to happen, personally.
I don't think it's ever going to happen.
So that was up to our first 50 podcasts. We'll get through some more of those next time and get to some other current events if anything pops up, if someone rolls over and makes something interesting happen. And you're still playing. Hopefully you'll be done with softcore by next time, Aahz.
I hope so. And hopefully Set Dungeons will be out of the game by then.
Don't you know anybody on your friends list who plays softcore? I mean, get like N3rdwards.
Yeah.
You had to get like N3rdwards or somebody. He can just T10 you until you find a Gilded Baron.
Yeah, I've got somebody on the lookout for one. He invited me into a Bandit Shrine one, but we didn't get any Gilded Barons, of course. So
close.
Yep.
All right. Well, good luck with that. And when you get your testicles back, welcome back to hardcore. I'm gonna kick you out of the clan in the meantime. I'm not to demote you from officer. You can't be an officer if you're playing soccer. I'm afraid it's one of the rules.
That's fair.
It is fair and just.
It's tough but fair.
Release the hoons! Okay, you've been listening to the Diablo 3 podcast, and as debuted on episode 5 back 14 years ago. At this point, we talk about mad cows, and what do mad cows say?
Moo.
Moo.
Moo, 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 moo.
Moo. Okay, so here you just heard Osmodius and Flux talking about the first 50 episodes of the Diablo podcast, and a little bit of how his background getting onto the show was. I'm now cutting into the segment I'm recording with the other two people, Muggs and N3rdwards. I know your names. It doesn't really matter.
Other two people.
With Jay Wilson and Josh Mosquera here. Say hi, Josh.
Hi.
Hi, man. I like the game. So, you guys recall we were looking at before we started recording here when your first appearance on the show was. You were earlier, Muggs, so why don't you go first? Had you ever listened to other podcasts? Why did you decide you wanted to join the show? Did you practice in the mirror at home beforehand?
I always listened. I was a big
excite?
fan of podcasts. I still am a big fan of podcasts. It's probably one of the best things to have when you're in a car and you don't really feel like listening to music for whatever topic that you happen to really enjoy. So I had always listened to this podcast because I'd always really liked Diablo. And then right around, I think it was just right around Diablo beta, when that one started to end, is when you kind of sent out an email that said you're looking for other casters. And I volunteered. And that was July 16th, 2012 was my first podcast.
On show number 72.
Yeah, that was a long time ago. So.
And did you have the? I was talking to Aahz about this last week, where you get that thing where you hear your voice on an answering machine. You're like, "What the hell is that sound? I don't sound like that." Did you have when you listened to yourself on the podcast at first? Was it weird, or had you heard yourself on a recording?
No, I heard myself on a recording. It didn't faze me. I knew I was going to sound as I sound, I guess I could say.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I mean, it doesn't bother me. I know what I sound like. I'm not like. I also teach. For those who don't know, so I teach in college. So like I'm used to standing in front of people and talking all day. So I know what I sound like because students record me and they'll play back and they said, "When you said this, what does this mean?" So it doesn't bother me. It doesn't really bother me at all.
So you had adequate preparation for your of this.
Yeah.
And have you? If we stop this podcast tomorrow, would you seek a new podcast outlet? Would you start your own podcast? Do you want to be on sports podcasts? Or do you get enough talking to obnoxious children when you're getting paid for it?
Yeah, I get enough talking. I don't think I would start my own podcast, but if there was another podcast, I would. And it was like D3 or something. It has to be a topic that I can sit down. Like D3 is one of those things I can sit down and like I play it enough and I read about it enough and I research it enough on my own time that I can sit down and have a conversation about it, at any point and not feel like I have to like read from notes or bullet points or anything like that. So it would have to be something along those lines where I'm passionate enough about it that I could, just have a conversation about it.
So same questions to you, NerdWords. We had to look up when your first appearance was, and it was surprisingly recent. Your first one was, I've forgotten already, was it 142 or something?
Yeah,
like that?
Something like that. It was July 2014.
Yeah, first-time guest, show 144, talking about Greater Rifts and Legendary Gems. Ironically, we just spent this whole show talking about Greater Rifts and Legendary Gems. So
right?
Some things that never changed. Same thing, so I just thought I asked them about Muggs. I mean, had you listened to podcasts before? Did you practice? Was it weird?
I've listened to podcasts for a while. This actually, the Diablo Podcast was the first one I listened to. And then I kind of branched out from there and into like other video gaming podcasts and stuff and listened to them. But I'd never done a podcast before. I've heard my voice recorded though, so I wasn't like worried about that. And I didn't really rehearse. I'd done like little like shows and stuff before, so I wasn't really. I've done speaking like Muggs has before too, so I wasn't too worried about it. But yeah, I like him. I've always been a big fan of Diablo and the series and stuff, and I followed the site for years. I mean, all the way back from Diablo 2. So it was like kind of cool. You put out a casting call thing, just like with Muggs, like what Muggs said, and I put a thing out and said, yeah, hey, I'd like to try it out. And I guess it worked out okay.
How many shows were you on before you started playing Greater Rifts during the show? Do you remember?
This season was the first time I started playing while rifting.
You felt confident enough you could just do it with one hand while you're playing and talking at the same time?
Well, I was just softcore, right? So
why don't you love me anymore, NerdWords? I know Jake Wilson doesn't love me anymore, but
it's because you abandoned
him. You must have total concentration.
Yeah, I feel like rifting.
No, you don't.
Wait, what?
Sorry. Was that? I was just starting a T10 game. I didn't hear.
Oh, wait.
Nice.
Muggs is like, wait, what? Hey, Muggs, can you join up here? We can play some Wonder. We're just talking.
Dude, come on.
There we go.
Yeah, that was a common thing. Back in the early days, Nineball was a guest on a lot of early shows. He was always like doing some WoW raid in the middle of the show, and like every fifth question I'd ask him, he'd be like, wait, okay, sorry, what was that? like he was in the middle of like killing the lettuce queen or the panda lord or whatever the hell's in that game.
The panda lord.
I don't know. That was the whole expansion about the goddamn panda lord.
Oh my god, the panda lord.
And just the third movie of it just came out recently, so it's doing pretty well. It's a popular series. Yeah, so that was back at 144 forever ago. So what I did last week on the show with Asmodeus, which you guys have listening heard about 5 minutes ago, because I'm going to change the order of this when I edit them a bit, is hit some of the shows that had interesting things either at the time or in retrospect, and get a little bit of commentary on that. And we'll start right off on number 53, December 2011. Our former guest, Azure, who used to be on here, who was allegedly an Australian, talked about economic stuff, and that was all about the Diablo 3 auction house. That was right after the auction house.
I remember him and his big auction post. Oh, yeah.
And he was a big economic guy.
Yeah, I remember
So we went
those.
to a bunch of beta. That was when the auction house was during the beta test, and they had opened up for testing and gave us all like fake money to play with and buy stuff. And Azure did a bunch of testing on that and talking about economic issues. And I can't recall the details, but I'm pretty sure it all worked out really well, and everyone loved that feature of the game.
Yeah.
You guys remember the auction house in the beta, or back in the early days?
Yes, I completely remember
absolutely.
the auction house back then.
It was great, right? We all loved it. No complaints.
Oh, I mean, rapid inflation is all I could say. You know, it's like I remember like 1,000 DPS one-handers was like the thing to have, and like I remember going, you know, obviously it was my non-understanding of economics, but I'm like, oh, they're worth about 1 million gold now, but I'm going on vacation for a couple days. I'm not going to buy one now. When I get back, I bet you they'll be cheaper because there'll be more in the auction house. And I was completely wrong when they came.
Yeah, right.
They were like 30, 40 million. I'm like, holy shit, what the hell happened?
Yeah, not only the supply of gold would increase much more rapidly than the supply of 1,000 damage weapons.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it was just obscene. So,
yeah,
I've seen some pretty common reaction to the auction house. Yes, go ahead, N3rdwards.
No, I had a lot of. I mean, I just spent a lot of time on the auction house. I played a lot with vanilla, and you kind of had to, you know. So I have good memories and bad memories. I know I made a little bit of money on the real money auction house. I never bought anything on the real money auction house, but I spent a lot of time on the regular auction house. That was probably the best change to the game, though, right?
Yeah, I mean, the real money auction house, I actually paid for Reaper of Souls with the real money auction house.
Yeah, which is nice, right?
With the collector's edition, yeah.
Can't complain.
No, the real money.
Get your wings for free.
Yeah, and then I got so tired of the auction house and the way the rapid inflation was. That was actually one of the big things that pushed me back into hardcore. I mean, I played hardcore in D2, and then I played it. I was just like, I'm just done with this because the hardcore auction house was much more feasible. Like, you didn't have to have like the top 0.1% item to actually sell something. You know, like people were buying stuff because people were dying. So.
Yeah, and even less than that. We're selling, like, you know, gym recipes for like 10 million gold and stuff. It was crazy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's because you didn't get to keep them after you died.
Yeah. So one of the just the next show up, we took a little break over the end of December in 2011. The next show up, number 54 in January 2012. The beta was in full swing. That was when they'd open up invitations to like everybody, and it was much easier to get in. We had lots of guests in it. And we did this whole debate about how maybe the game was too easy in the early levels, and they did some more balancing and tweaking.
Yeah,
it's like, in
it was too easy to level
gives
13.
A shit?
Yeah.
Up to level 13, it was too easy. It's like, really?
Yeah. I was in the beta. I remember. I mean, I was in the early beta and the late beta, and I remember being part of that group that was very vocal on the forum saying, one, we need to see more, but they were trying to keep everything under lock and key, and like the game just didn't, like, the game was a joke. I remember sitting farming the guys right before the Skeleton King because they were the only ones that could drop an amulet, and farming those guys over and over again to try to see how much DPS you could get on your character at level 13. So,
I mean, you could kill the Skeleton King in 2 shots again.
Yeah, so then you did it over and over and over again.
Yeah, I played the hell out of the beta, and exactly what you said, just grinding those guys, like, just running the same thing over and over and over again. I was so tired of seeing Lyric, and then the game came out, and we just did it even more. Yeah,
when the game came out, like, I wanted, you know, when you had to pick an area to farm, I wouldn't farm the Orc at all. Like, that whole beginning area, I'm like, I'm done with this part of the game.
So sick of that,
Yeah. So, but at the time, I mean, I loved it. It was great. It was just, you know, it was just different. Like, you know, you saw the whole revamp in skills. I mean, that was like when... I was playing a Witch Doctor a lot back then, and it was when Firebomb was actually like a mana spell and like actually did a lot of damage versus when they changed it to everybody has to have what was called a generator and then a spender or signature spell or whatever the hell they called it.
As always, blame Jay Wilson.
Yeah.
So the next show was number 58, February 2012. That was when Blizzard announced they were not going to have player fatalities. If you guys remember from the very early days, that first demo video where they fought the Siegebreaker.
Oh, yeah.
And, like, he grabbed a guy and, like, bit him in half and, like, tore his head off, and it was all, like super gooey and gory. And there was another specialized death, and that was a whole cool thing in the early days. They were saying that different monsters would have special, different death animations on you. When you died, you would have a special animation depending on what killed you. And players were all excited about this, and what if I get bitten in half, and will it be, like, can you record it in slow motion and hardcore? And then Bashiok, at this point in January 2012, was like, you know, that's like something we just put in the one demo build that's really never been functional in the game, and it's not going to be in the final game. Okay, thanks, bye. And there was, like, massive controversy, but you promised us this, and, like, I already pre-ordered the game and I want this.
That was the demo build that Jay Wilson was, like, narrating the entire thing, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
To make it even better than it was.
Okay, I'm trying to remember the
Yeah, that was the very first preview of Diablo 3 way back at the Worldwide Invitational in, like, 2008.
Yeah,
so
I
it was
remember
forever
that.
ago.
And imagine.
But then, like 4 years later, they finally said, "This isn't actually a feature. It just kind of looks fun." So basically, it was vaporware, if you want to be honest about it.
Well, they realized they couldn't fit it in with every mob and everything.
But they were so. Imagine if that feature was still in the game. So certain monsters, obviously, just like the big ones, Siege Breaker and Act bosses and stuff. If they happened to kill you with their one special attack, it would give you a special death animation. I mean, I realize you wouldn't even notice that in softcore because you die like 100 times a game.
Right, thousand.
Just constantly, just nonstop.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess that'd be cool the first couple times you saw it, and after that you wouldn't even care anymore.
It would be like cutscenes, and you would click the little box in the thing.
Can I skip my death animation?
Yeah, ignore all death animations.
But what about in hardcore?
No, it would be cool.
You don't die that often in hardcore.
But I mean, it took how many years to get an announcement that you died in hardcore?
I think I'm still waiting for it, actually. Oh, you mean in clans?
Yeah, those clan announcements where you're like, oh, such and such has died.
Well, yeah, clans and guilds are another issue, though. But I mean, just if you're waving your magic wand of game development, right? Would you even care if there were like special? I mean, you kind of get ragdolled down, you see a little corpse go flying off the screen. Sometimes you hang up on some wall and it's kind of cute, but you don't really even notice how you die when you die. I mean, I'm assuming in softcore you guys see it often enough to keep track of it, right? So. Would you even care? I mean,
no. I mean, honestly, in softcore, like I said, when you're pushing hard enough from earlier in the podcast, like you just die. Like there's just stuff that just like you're like, how the hell did I just die there? You have no idea.
Yep. One mortar, I'm dead.
Yeah, like you're just dead. I mean, seriously, like I'll be running on my horse through like mobs, and it's like you were killed by a thing. I'm like, wow, what hit me? So, yeah.
F you on the horse you rode in on, right?
Exactly. So.
Yeah, so that was a big deal at the time, and in retrospect, no one cares. So I guess we can get over that. The next interesting thing was
wait,
show
go
60.
back to that. Wasn't that same thing where the rainbow thing came from? That same little video where everybody got all freaked out because of the rainbow on the waterfall?
Yeah, but the rainbow's still there on the waterfall.
Right, I know, but it wasn't that the same. I mean, because there was like two things that people were really upset about. Wasn't that the rainbow and the waterfall?
We did the art controversy 100 times before this, though. So that was
okay.
that was back in like 2000. That was before we had a podcast, man. That was like 2 years before a podcast even started. The art controversy had mostly died down by then, but I'm sure we'd have our first 10 shows would be about the art controversy otherwise. Why are there rainbows in my Diablo 3? So the next one up was show 62 in February 2012, and that's when they announced that PvP was not going to make it into the initial release. And this was after we had... yeah, or a later release. That was after we had Blizzcon 2010 and 2011 had a really awesome PvP team deathmatch demo everybody loved, and we were all expecting this to be in the final game. And when they announced it wasn't going to be in the game on February 12, Jay Wilson Pinky promised, that it would be added before the end of the first year. And they did, in fact, make that. They patched in Brawling on, like, December 30th at, like, 2 in the morning, something like that. Mm-hmm. So technically, yes, there was PvP in the game. Do you guys remember before the game, were you looking forward to PvP? Did you ever get to BlizzCon to try out the PvP demo?
No. I never cared about PvP.
I mean, I thought the demo looked really cool. Like, the demo really did look interesting, and I remember seeing it and, like, seeing the videos from it, and it would have been an interesting concept to add to the game, but it didn't make a difference to me either way. So.
And the only people I think who still care about PvP are those of us who actually got to play the demos at BlizzCon and remember how awesome they were.
I mean, they look like a lot of fun. The BlizzCon demos looked amazing. Like, if they put something like that in there, well, actually, they did. It's called Heroes of the Storm. So,
yeah, exactly. That's been a running joke. And I flat out asked, I think it was Josh or Wyatt, said, did you guys not put in PvP because you were saving it for Heroes of the Storm? Uh-huh. And he looked horrified. He's like, no, of course not. That had nothing to do with our decision. And, I mean, obviously he was lying, but actually I don't think he was lying. But I just, they just, the main issue is what they always point out, that there's no way to balance PvP with everyone using their own characters, it would get even harder with every patch, because there's 1,000 new items every patch, right?
Yeah.
And there's just... And I've just forever said, why don't you have like an arcade-style brawler where you get to choose your characters from a pre-made list, and you can kind of balance those characters, and we can all just figure out strategies with them like we had at BlizzCon. And they go, well, people only want to do PvP with their own characters. So that means we don't get in either case. We don't get the pre-made ones, and we don't get to use our own because they can never balance it to make our own.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, if you talk about power creep and power leap, I mean... people are hitting for 1 trillion. It's just like, it wouldn't be fun. You'd go in there and you'd be like, you'd see some like P350 and then some like P1900 or 2000 come in there and just wipe the floor with you. So. Like.
So we'll never get it, and that is the end of the story.
Go play Heroes of the Storm.
Yeah, it's a PvE game. It's not a PvP game.
Another amusing thing, that number 62 show, that was the Diablo INet's 15th anniversary. Just we happened to mention on that same podcast. So
nice.
So we're damn near the 20th anniversary now.
Wow.
Another year. If you like it, last another year. We're old.
Oh.
I'm old.
I'm old.
Get off my lawn, dude.
Getting old.
Pretty sad.
I'm old balls.
I need to go. Do you guys have any Metamucil? I'm like really thirsty right now.
Talk about bowel movements. That's when you know you're old.
I think that's usual. That's your usual podcast online, isn't it? So the next one of some interesting stuff was May 2012, right before release, number 67. I did a show called Bold Predictions Podcast, and I asked a bunch of our regular guests, which might have included you, Muggs, your regular guest. Actually, you weren't quite there at that point.
I was on the next
7
month, yeah.
You were 7 shows away from being a regular guest. And I didn't want to go back and listen to all of them again, but I asked everybody some basic questions. What will be the least and most popular classes? And obviously that answer depends on which patch it is. Will there be a major hack or cheat or dupe or other problem requiring a patch fix in the next few months? And many people said no, in retrospect, feeling very stupid about that, I guess. We asked about followers. Will they be essential, irrelevant, or something in between in Hell and Inferno? And obviously that's kind of hard to answer because Inferno was unplayable at the start. Will the real money auction house take off with players paying up to 250 max price cap within the first few months?
Most
yes?
definitely.
Yeah.
I got that
Like
one right.
1,000%, most definitely.
How long will it take people to beat Inferno in softcore and hardcore? And that was when Blizzard thought it would take months, and someone did it in like 3 days to beat Inferno, I think, or 4 days.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, as a wizard, you could beat it pretty early, using cheesy mechanics. But yeah, you could. The Blizzard Hydra build was able to do it, like if you were actually trying to do it, but you had to have the gear, and that was next to impossible, as everyone knows. But there was a bug with Archon where, what was it? If you used a potion while you popped Archon, at the same time, you were in permanent Archon, and you couldn't die. Like, you wouldn't die out of it for some reason. And so people could just beat the game, on Inferno, without even, just by cheesing it.
The other cheese that was going on, they actually patched out before it got there. I can't remember the guy, some annoying streamer back in the day, they figured out that the monk auras, the monk mantras are much more powerful, and one of them would give the entire party like 3 seconds of invulnerability.
No, Serenity. There was a Serenity.
And you would just cycle,
Yeah, okay, your Serenity.
So the 4 of you would just take
Serenity,
turns casting
Serenity,
you'd all be immune.
I think it's
probably they were up to like Act 2 and Blizzard patched it in the middle of their game, and they all had like 1,000 hit points because they were just putting all their stats and they were just all completely doomed. They couldn't even advance 1 second further. It's like, thanks, Blizz.
Well, and there was that other thing with the wizard that was like, you couldn't take more than like a certain percentage of HP damage, so you'd like kept really low HP and this thing would proc and never let you die. I can't remember what the hell it was.
Yeah, there were lots of all the early Inferno beatings were bugs and cheats, and Blizzard patched them all pretty rapidly, and then it got then the next bug to fix it to beat Inferno was the auction house. So
yes,
that was your only chance. Other predictions briefly: when will PvP be patched in? When will D3 announce? Will the expansion be announced and released? And can you make a bold prediction for the 6th class? I don't think anybody said Crusader for the 6th class, but there were some reasonable guesses. We all thought it was going to be like a shapeshifter.
I think a lot of people said Paladin, and that
close
wasn't.
enough.
Yeah, I mean that was close enough. That was my guess back then, was a Paladin. So.
And we're still waiting on the next expansion, which will be announced at BlizzCon this year, right? No, wait, probably not. For the last 2 years, haven't we? The next interesting show was number 70. It was all about hardcore. I was not playing hardcore at the very start, and Xanth was. It was one of his first times on the podcast. Many people at that point thought hardcore was literally impossible. People were wiping like 10 times on the average elite pack back in those days. I mean, like literally, you get to Inferno and you would die 10 times to the first boss like you got in the Weeping Hollow or something. Nobody had any toughness. All our gear was garbage unless you were using the auction house, and then your gear was expensive garbage. And people were just like, how could you possibly play hardcore? I mean, like, getting to 60 was like an incredible achievement with hardcore at that point.
Yeah.
Yes, it was.
Do you remember when you first played hardcore, Nerdwords, and how tough it was to get into it? Oh,
yeah,
wait.
it was so hard.
Core. And you were playing hardcore initially, Muggs.
Yeah.
Do you recall, were you in the Inferno days in hardcore? Back
I was in the Inferno days. I was playing hardcore pre-Paragons and all the rest of that good stuff. So, it was a pain in the ass. Not only was it a pain in the ass, it took forever. Like, nowadays you could power leveled in 30 minutes. There was no power leveling. It took forever. It was a big chore. The only thing that was good about hardcore, like I said before, was the auction house was actually like doable by most people, and all kinds of things were being purchased. So like you'd find something as you were leveling and you could sell it, so, and people would buy it because they were constantly leveling. But yeah, it was a chore. So
speaking of before Paragon levels, do you remember the early days? By the way, you weren't playing hardcore in NERDWords, but do you remember the early days of Inferno and trying to get past it? It was just, aside from drinking a potion while using Archon?
Yes. No, I do. It was hell on earth. It was all the gear to beat Act 2 was in Act 2, but you couldn't get through Act 2 properly. So it was just chain dying and fighting barrel bosses.
Yeah, they had that thing where all the legendary items were like level 61, 62, or 63.
Yeah, the eye levels.
You can only get 61s in Act 1, but you had to get to higher level to Act 2 or Act 3 or 4 to get the better.
We would do we called it the fromage. Before I switched to hardcore and softcore, we would do stuff like get indestructible magic find gear because repairing stuff was really expensive, and then cheese our way into Act 4 and farm pots for weapons. To sell on the auction house. Yeah, that was like the extent of my game. Like that was like, what did you do today? Well, I farmed pots. Or we'd go into
I clicked on barrels for 3 hours.
Yeah, or we'd go into Act 3 and like there was a couple spots where like you're heading down towards Sidea and like you could kill the elites from like on the top and they wouldn't come up to you. So like you would sit there with 3 different wizards and like they would just spam Blizzard for like 3 minutes until the elite die, then go back down there and hope you got a good item, an eye level 63 item to sell on the auction house. Yeah, good days, fun stuff.
And that was a lot of that changed pretty quickly as they started putting a lot of patches out. The next podcast of interest was number 78 from late August 2012, patch 1.04.
Oh, you skipped mine. I was in 74. 77.
The introduction of the Paragon System, so item makeover, class rebalancing, all kinds of major changes, and that that was on the PTR at that point. Made things a lot better in a lot of ways. It's funny to think, we have this super involved Paragon System now. Initially, there wasn't anything. I mean, you got to level 6 and you were just done.
Yep, that was it.
So it was like, hey, you're going to find items now.
Well, but I mean, the auction house was its own game. That was like, as much as we talk shit about the auction house, it was like that was the end game. I mean, the one thing that really upset me about the auction house is like I would always be reticent to like give my friends gear, or like I'd be like, hey, I found this really cool item. Well, I could use that item. I'd be like, well, I could give you a bro deal. That's what we call it. Like, so I'll sell it to you for a little bit cheaper than I'd sell it for the auction house. But like that was its own game within itself. It's like, oh, cool, I got an item, so I can now put it on the auction house, so I can go buy another item, so maybe I can go find another. So that was the meta, or the meta game back then was playing the auction house.
Yep.
So I spent as much time in the auction house as I did playing the game, if not more.
And it was more profitable, too. Yeah, exactly. So the next show of some note was number 83, was in November 2012, and that was when they announced that PvP was going to be a free-for-all style, which is what we see in Brawling. And we mentioned this a minute ago, but until I was reviewing these podcasts, reviewing the initial podcast to talk about on this podcast, I had totally forgotten that all the PvP was in teams, where it was either 2v2 or 3v3 in the demos and the early videos and at BlizzCon, and how different that was going to be for the strategy, where the way you won the duel is it would keep track of how many deaths were on each team. So if you had one guy that kept dying constantly, it didn't matter if the other two of you weren't dying, because then your team would still lose, or vice versa. And we don't even think about. People think now how hard it would be to balance for PvP, like we were just talking about, for 1v1, or just free-for-all. But imagine balancing it for teams. It's like, can you imagine the kind of teams you would do, and like who would be your tank and who would be your CC?
They would look just like the Greater Rift teams right now. You'd probably have
that's what I was thinking. Would you just have two CC lockdowns and then one DPS in the back row?
Yeah, I mean, if you watch, it's very boring to watch, and you probably can't sit through it for very long. But watch WoW PvP. That's probably exactly what it would be. I mean, almost to a T. Like where you got like 2 healers and like a damage dealer, or it's like a healer, CCer, and then a damage dealer. It's like not interesting in any way, shape, or form.
Well, there's the pull quote for the show. WoW PvP, too boring to actually watch. Get right on that, thanks. Hope you weren't planning on going to BlizzCon next year, Muggs.
WoW PvP it's fun to play. It's not fun to watch. At all.
Yeah, it's not a big esport yet.
It never will be.
Yeah,
it's not. It's probably been around really long time and nobody watches it. So, like all 10 people that sit in the Twitch chat watch it.
Even the WoW players don't watch it.
It's not fun.
Okay, so talk about a big notes. Show 84, January 2012. Jay Wilson announces his resignation from the Diablo 3 team. Do you guys remember where you were when Jay Wilson went away?
Yes. Yeah.
And did you care?
Yeah, I did. I really did. I thought, as much as Josh and all the rest of them say, like the reason why the game plays the way it does is because of Jay Wilson, and the way it feels the way it does is because of Jay Wilson. And for that, I thank him. But I also remember Jay, with his D2 sucked, basic statements, or rares should always be better than legendaries. Legendaries should be terrible because rares are harder to roll. Or just these comments that would come out that completely were wrong. And being a longtime ARPG player knew they were wrong, but he would never see that they were wrong, and they would pull a 180 or completely change their style. And his face is what I see every time that happens. So it's
oh God.
Jay Wilson face. We used to do Bobby's eyes as a joke. Should we do Jay Wilson face jokes now?
Please.
Do you have any Jay Wilson thoughts?
It didn't affect me as much. He was a lot of the stuff he said was like you said, kind of off the cuff, and was like, what? Why? Are you really the one designing this right now? But I didn't want to see the guy lose his job necessarily. I guess I don't know. I wasn't that invested in the hatred of him. Yeah,
I had no personal hate for the guy. I just didn't. His idea for what made a D3 a good game or D2 a good game, because you remember when he came out, he would be like, well, we didn't like this in D2. And as a longtime D2 player, I'd be like, I love that in D2. That's why I played D2. What are you talking about? And so he would constantly say these things, and that's why we're doing stuff different. But, I had no personal hate for the guy. And the game, even when I play I'll go play Grim Dawn, or I'll go play PoE sometimes if I'm really bored. And I'll go back to D3, and D3 is still, of all the isometric ARPGs out there, the most fluid, the most fun to play. So for that, I thank them. But, and they've made all these changes now over the years that D3 is a really fun and amazing game because it had a good base or a good platform to build off of.
Yeah.
Another stirring pull quote from you there, Muggs. After your PvP in WoW is too boring to watch, I'll play Path of Exile if I'm really bored. You're just an advertising slogan generator, aren't you, man?
I'm batting 1,000 tonight. You can tell him.
We should license you out to an ad agency. Yeah, I'll. It's not bad if you don't have any ball sweat to drink. New Gatorade from Muggs. If you're fresh out of nut sweat. Okay, great, thanks. Yeah, I met Jay a number of times at BlizzCons. I interviewed him a couple of times. He was a really nice guy. He was very passionate, and I kind of was aware. I don't want to make it sound like I have super secret inside knowledge, but I just kind of assumed that most of the stuff he was saying in interviews was this is what the team has decided after lots of effort, and maybe it's not even my personal opinion, but I'm the spokesperson for the game, therefore that's what I'm saying. So I didn't really personalize it as much. Obviously Jay Wilson and Bashiok were kind of the two main faces of the franchise in those early days, and both of them, which led to a messy end for both of them, I guess. But I wasn't, Bashiok, obviously, he had his opinions about the game, but he was just saying whatever he was, supposed to say. It's his job. He's a PR guy,
Yeah, I never had any feelings toward. It's the same thing with Neville is, or Neville, whatever her name is. I don't have any feelings towards her. She's a mouthpiece. So, Bashiok.
Did I mention that she's blonde and has large breasts? Does that change your opinion? No?
I don't know.
Maybe not. Yeah, so I didn't really have that much of an opinion about when Jay Wilson left. It's I guess he was a major contributor to the game, but it wasn't like it was Jay Wilson's Diablo 3,
Right, but there was, Josh, after he left and they announced Josh and they put him in there and, you started seeing John Yang come forward and, the game really did start to change drastically. You start to see, these changes come in that, okay, well, we're not going to hold true to these ideas and these philosophies that brought us to this point that, obviously people are extremely unhappy with the game, and even the longtime people are unhappy. And they, it just he was the face of what we saw that was bad, but the second he left, everything that we thought was bad started changing. So it was it hits him from both sides. It's okay, well, it sucked when you were there, and then you said stupid things, because you had to, and then you left, and now it got better. So it's like I said, I don't hate the guy, but you definitely
it worked out, right?
Yeah, it definitely worked out for the best.
But I think most of the rest of the team was also there during the development in Jay Wilson time, and they all were able to change based on hard lessons and learning what the problems were. I think Jay probably could have done it also, but probably he was tired of getting slagged on so much, and maybe he was, just.
But maybe he was
more,
the person that was like,
had to some feature changes.
When you have somebody at the head of your company or the head of your group or the head of your area, and they're very passionate about a certain thing, you kind of follow your leader. You get in there, you get behind your leader, and maybe that's what they really did need, a change of venue or a change of idea at the top to really start getting these ideas out, or the new ideas.
And it's certainly a PR thing too. I mean, people, rightly or wrongly, to whatever extent, people associated a lot of the bad problems in the game with Jay, and if Jay was gone, then you're more free to clean slate, moving on, that kind of thing.
Right, but I mean, how many people besides the people that listen to this podcast and us nerds that really follow D3? I mean, how many of the average players even knew who Jay Wilson was?
Well, he'd done all the PR for 3 years.
Yeah,
so,
but I mean, there's still, I don't know. I mean,
there's.
You could probably get in a game now and ask people, do you know who Jay Wilson is? I don't think people would know.
Well, that's been a long time. That's like 20 years in Reddit years, There's like 14-year-olds that are chatting on it. They didn't play the game before freaking Reaper of Souls came out, right?
Yeah, that's true.
But I mean, at the time, they were obviously trying to win over the people who'd already bought the game and were disillusioned by it. So I imagine a lot of them knew who Jay Wilson was. But anyway, we talked about enough Jay Wilson stuff here. So the last one we have in the first 100 is up just to number 97, which was in July of 2012. As I mentioned last time with Aahz, it's funny how many podcasts we were doing back in the old days. A couple of the earlier ones, it was number 11 would be in March, and then number 27 was in April. We were doing 2 and 3 a week sometimes back in the old days. I'm not sure what got into me at that point. But anyway,
free time.
Number 97 was 2 months after number 85, so zoom. And that was all about my recent visit to Blizzard headquarters, and they had a summer Fansite summit thing in that year in July. We had suddenly been unblackballed after being 2 years of being blackballed with no explanation for either of those changes of events. It's kind of like if you live with a really crazy woman and you've had great times together and great sex, and then suddenly for a month and a half she wouldn't talk to you and would throw things at you every time you saw her, and then suddenly she loved you again and there was no explanation about in between. And I realize both you guys have been in long-term relationships, so you're yeah, that's pretty much what it's like already.
Pretty much a standard day in the life.
Pretty well sums it up, huh? Aunt Flo comes to visit and bad things happen. But yeah, that was kind of what our relationship with Blizzard was. It was hey, we know nothing, and hey, we know something. But anyway, I had been invited to Blizzard and was able to see some stuff and meet all the developers and talk about things. And they had this whole big thing at the Fansite Summit in July of 2012. And I wrote about that stuff and some of the new features. And basically the whole point of it was that they were massively crunching on the expansion pack at that point, which was announced later that year at Gamescom. But they hadn't announced it yet, of course. And so the whole point of this Fansite Summit was, we're going to invite you and some guy from Reddit and some guy from, was it Diablo Some Page, and some tech guy from Diablo fans, and there was some streamer I'd never even heard of. I think he's been long since gone. And just sort of we were going to give you inside information about how there's not going to be any patches for the next few months, and you guys should just play the game as it is and hang tight. And at this point, there were lots of complaints about the game and people wanting fixes. The itemization was a total mess, etc. And I didn't remember any of this. I had to go listen to part of the podcast and look at the notes to recall what the situation was at the time. But there'll be a test later, so be sure you keep making notes on all this stuff.
Yes, sir.
But the whole funny part of it is I wrote this huge article about it, which I'll link to in the podcast notes if you guys want to check it out in retrospect. And, just listed all the facts of the thing and everything they told us exactly. And then right at the start I said, I have 2 predictions. These are just my own opinions based on what I saw and what I think is going to happen. And these are not what Blizzard said officially. Just please don't take this as official word of anything. This is just my guess. And number 1 was that they were not making an itemization patch since they were making huge changes in the upcoming expansion, which was going to be announced at BlizzCon. And the same reason they weren't doing any patches in the next month. And Blizzard had not said that, but it seemed pretty obvious. And because I made those predictions, Blizzard said, yeah, great, I'll write up. We're not going to link to it from any of our official platforms or for Twitter.
because it's too accurate.
Because you're putting opinions in it and not just quoting what we said. And the best part about that, in retrospect, I was absolutely right in both my predictions. So, Seriously. Double fucking middle fingers. Just
nice.
so that is in a microcosm what it's like dealing with Blizzard PR. Like they want you to do what they want you to do, but if you ever put an opinion out they don't want you to say, then they're like, well, that's great, we can't link to your content now. We're going to link to like the guy wrote like a paragraph on Diablo fans, like, yeah, I went to Blizzard, it was great, really fun, no patches this summer, and they had like a major like main page link to it and all this like exciting shit. And I wrote like a 10,000 word article with like all these pictures and just about everything we met and all the cool stuff we saw. I got to play Hearthstone and the beta version, all this bullshit. But because I made a couple of predictions, clearly stated as predictions and opinions, which were, as I will point out again, fucking right, they don't link to it. So,
might have been why. Maybe it's because you were right. They didn't link to it.
Yeah, exactly.
They're like, oh shit,
you touched a nerve. They figured somebody said something to you. Somebody talked to him.
Somebody talked, Flux.
Yeah.
But see, in my idea at the time, fans were like, obviously it's hard to remember. This is 4 years ago, but at the time, people were really pissed about the game. The itemization was terrible. Most legendaries still totally sucked at this point. All the set items were garbage. This is still in Diablo 3 vanilla,
No, I remember.
And all the big changes came about in what we call Diablo 3 version 2, which was released right before
Reaper,
the expansion. And that was when we got smart loot, and that was when you no longer found intelligence on quivers, all that kind of bullshit. So itemization just was a total pain in the ass and sucked. Legendaries still mostly sucked. Sets all sucked. And people were like clamoring for changes, and there was no patches. Blizzard basically did this whole Fansite summit and said, hey, we're not going to patch anything for the next 4 months. Have fun. But we're going to give more blue posts. Will that be okay? More blue posts?
Yeah, everybody loves blue posts.
Bueller? Blue posts? Bueller?
Drink the Kool-Aid, Flux. Drink the Kool-Aid.
And based on this, I said, well, okay, this is kind of suck. We're not going to get any patches. But the reason we're not getting any patches is because they're all crunching on the expansion pack, and it's going to all be worth it in the long run. And Blizzard PR is like, oh, no, you dare not say that. We're not going to link to your shit. I'm not so bitter about this or anything. I'm right. So why don't you guys talk about how much you hate Blizzard PR? Oh, wait,
you were vindicated, Flux. There's nothing to be pissed about anymore.
So do you guys recall back in the forever ago, I mean, obviously we're talking about Diablo 3 Vanilla and Inferno. This is after the Inferno nightmare was mostly fixed. Remember they nerfed it so you could actually find level 63 items?
Yeah, you found level 63 items everywhere.
But the auction house was still very much in the game, and most people couldn't really power through. Remember the whole Ironborn thing? Like it was.
Yes, I do remember the Ironborn thing.
You don't want to play the auction house, and let's have a separate game mode to actually self-find.
Yeah, I remember that. It was interesting and it was fun, and I played it for a little while, but it got boring really quickly.
Yeah, and then Diablo 3 version 2 came out right before Reaper of Souls, and suddenly everybody was Ironborn. Now you found tons of uniques; they were actually good, and you couldn't trade them. So.
Well, they weren't that good. They were better. But even in the beginning of Reaper Souls, there were still sets for most classes weren't used. You were using the crafted sets and all the rest of that stuff.
And Legendary, yeah.
So and you played exactly the same. It wasn't like you did anything different, So, but it just you got more of your own loot.
Yeah, thanks for adding a lot there, guys. You jumped in. You don't remember exactly what the game was like 4 years ago? What's wrong with you, Tim?
Well, no, I mean, I do remember, you didn't use class sets.
I don't remember.
Right. It was all crafted sets. So, the Ashira set and the Oghild set.
And Captain's Crimson. I mean, Captain Born set was being used.
Yeah, so,
this is before Adventure Mode. This is before Hereditary Caches. This is before Reaper
you were running core variant for experience runs, and you were running, Keep Depths and stuff like that, because that's where the biggest density was. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh no! Actually, no.
There was no Ring of Royal Grandeur in the game.
So then it was Act 1. You would run Fields of Misery,
or Weeping Hollow, or the Halls of Agony, or
just killing slow motion zombies for hours and hours.
Come on. Yep. I mean, you go way back. It was like, okay, if you go here, you can usually get 5 stacks of Nephilim Valor.
Yeah.
And then you come over.
Oh god, yeah. You hit Festering Woods first, and you go into the crypt, and you go, oh my god.
Yeah, you could usually get 4 or 5 stacks because there was always an elite. There's always at least 2 elites, and then there's 1 in each thing.
And it wore off if you didn't kill an elite in time, because that was actually a thing. Like you would go certain amounts of time where you didn't find an elite so long that they would fall off.
Yeah, you'd lose Nephilim Valor.
Retarded.
And you would get it from golden caches, too.
Yeah.
Golden chests. So you would run to certain areas and have golden chests to get 1 more stack of Nephilim Valor. Okay, I'm not getting back a Nephilim Valor. That's just no. You might as well bring Jay Wilson back for that. The last one was the funny one. The next one up was in number 98, July 2012. that was excitement of joining the B Club, as we should call it, the Billionaire Club. You got a really big sale in the auction house, and I had just gotten at that point, and Zamp was on the show as well. As you mentioned earlier, the hardcore auction house was a lot more fun because you could actually sell items that weren't just the top, the 0.001% perfect item. Do you guys recall your first billion on Diablo 3?
Yes.
I do. Yes.
Yeah, I do. I got a score.
And was it special? Did your EPing swell?
Yeah, I mean, it felt good, like, because you got, like, that item and you put it up and, like, you're like, okay, this is a decent item. Let me put it in. You'd put no buyout and you'd put it up and, like, you weren't sure. You're like, okay, this is pretty good. Maybe I could get some decent gear. And, like, you kind of go back and, like, you check the auction house again and, like, it gone up. And then, like, people weren't really, and you're like, shit, maybe I should cancel the auction. And you're like, and then you kind of wait and you go play a little bit and you come back, you check the auction house and it gone up again. And then, like, all of a sudden it jumped and then, like, it jumped again. And you're like, holy shit, I'm going to have a ton I could buy. And then you're like a kid.
Then you start shopping. You're shopping before the auction even ends. Yeah. You're looking to see what you're
like,
going to buy.
You're like, okay, I could get this. Let me put a bid on this. I mean, I might not buy it right now, but let me bid on this and, like, get this. I completely remember it. I remember the exact feeling and everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and now of course that's like two vaults.
Yeah, you get it real quick.
Hey, I got another billion. What do I do? Okay, I'll do 2 empowered rifts.
And 2 or 3 empowered rifts.
Yeah, that's an empowered rift right there.
Yeah, I still recall the one item I sold. I remember I was in the 200 or 300 million range for a while, but I couldn't get any real jackpot items. And I found an IK gloves that had like 262 strength, which was like 200 was the most you could get. So I got like a double roll of strength on them. And that sold for like 850 million gold. And I was like, hey, I'm in the B Club. But I mean, it was like a whole big, obviously it didn't really make a difference. I didn't want to go. But the best gear was like 2 billion, so you couldn't even buy anything with it yet.
No, you couldn't get anything with it.
But I mean, compared to like having 50 million, having a billion was just, you could buy a couple of 200, 300 million weapons, and it was like, you just vastly improve your character immediately. And that's just such a foreign concept now, where gold. It's nice that gold actually has a value again now that we've empowered rifts.
Yeah, it went a
while. Oh yeah, no,
last
gold.
Couple of seasons, you get 20 billion and it had nothing to do with
I was actually debating like putting gold find gear on today because I'm like, I need more gold. I need to empower rifts, and like I'm not getting enough of it.
I think that's the unsung hero of this patch because that really has been a pretty cool change.
Yeah, the empowered rifts are great. Well, at least for a gold sync, they are.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's good because you get faster legendary gems, and also it gives you like another. It's almost like they've brought magic find back. They brought gold find back. Now you actually care about finding gold again.
Yeah,
it's a reason to care.
It's relevant. Yeah.
I mean, we were mentioning earlier, putting my Sages set on my, Intalias, and Boon of the Hoarder. We've all got like a farming build, right? Where you do T10 rifts or whatever, T8 rifts, and you put on your farming gear and your Boon of the Hoarder and your DB. You put your Sages set on, and it's like, hey, I'm just farming now.
Right, exactly.
And that was never a thing the last few seasons. I mean, maybe you needed DBs or souls at some point.
Sages was always a big deal, yeah. If you could run it.
Yeah.
I used to run it last season with a Witch Doctor. But
now there's so many recipes that just devour your DBs,
Oh, yeah, no, completely. I mean, I go through them all the time. Like, I go through sets and I'll gamble everything, and then I'll take everything that I gambled, all the yellows, and then I'll upgrade them just to see if I can get what the item is that I'm looking for. So, yeah, I go through DBs a lot.
And then your auto materials. Yeah. Well, DBs. But yeah, it's funny. So back in the old days, it was really rare to get like over 100 million was a lot for part-time players, and then getting a billion was like, oh my god, I'm so rich now. And then of course there are players who had like 100 billion because they were like massive auction house users,
or bots that we didn't think
started selling gold in the auction house, and it all got ugly. Remember they had to keep devaluing gold, how much you could sell at one time, because it was like a million, then it was 10 million, then it was 100 million. Because people were duping and botting so much gold that they kept having to change. Blizzard had to keep changing how much you could actually buy with real money, because there wasn't a way to put a low enough price to make 10 million gold worth buying. So they had to make it 100 million gold. That was obviously the beginning of the end for the auction house, if not before.
And that's when I jumped over to hardcore, because then it was a non-issue, because you couldn't buy and sell for real money in a hardcore auction house.
Yeah, at least not in the game itself.
Yeah. They had the third parties, but yeah.
Yeah, and the very last one here, 101 and 100 and 101, was the 2-part interview I did with Josh and Wyatt from over the phone on Skype right after I was at that July Fansite roundtable. And we tried to get, as I mentioned in the news post, we tried to get an interview with a developer on show 200. And I talked about this last show with Aahz, but I'm not going to reboot it all, of course. But, the Blizzard said, oh, great, congrats on show 200, and we're not doing any more interviews right now, so thanks. And as Oz pointed out, weren't they on like some really tiny unknown podcast like 2 days ago? It's like, yes, of course they were. Okay, not that tiny, but they have been doing lots of interviews and lots of publicity. And they'll like co-host some stream for like 3 hours just randomly, right?
Yeah, they're on. Well, does Blizz Pro still do them with 9ball on them? Because
I believe they do. Yes.
Yeah, because they're always on them. They like 9ball and Evelista or whatever the heck her name is. Like they're like buddies. You got to get 9ball on.
Well, a CM is not quite the same thing, yeah, but still.
Yeah.
But yeah, as I was joking with Oz last week, it's going to be kind of awkward when they co-host some brand new streamer for 7 hours next week with like the entire Blizzard development crew. It's like, well, that's not an interview. That's different. Like Flux would have actually asked them questions and would have just said, "Oh, that's great. I love the game. Do you love the game? I love the game too. What are botters? I never heard of that."
Yeah. That was one of the nice thing about one of the streamers. What was his name? Quinn. He actually did an interview. They gave him an interview at BlizzCon, and he nailed him really hard about that. He's not going to be allowed to do them again.
He did ask some good, much better than streamer questions usually.
Well, I mean, they weren't
like,
Flux
why is
questions.
the game so awesome?
They weren't Flux questions, but yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to like third degree the guys, but I mean, I've been talking to game developers in Blizzard North and Blizzard for 15 years or something. So it's like they're just nerds who make video games. It's not.
You're not in awe.
Not. Don't get awestruck. It's just like, well, I'd like to get a. Well, that was the problem. People used to remember forever ago. It was fan sites before Diablo fans was the other major fan site. There were like other ones back in forever ago. Like God, I can't remember what they were called. It must have been so long. But they would be like, why do you think you're like journalists? Why are you asking hard questions? Like, well, in theory, we are journalists. That's kind of the point, right? They have full-time cheerleaders who only say good things. They're called community managers. In theory, fan sites are like the voice of the fans to some extent, and like you want to kind of ask the questions the fans want answers. Like the reason they invited you to BlizzCon and gave you an interview is because you have a platform and you have lots of fans who are reading it, and like you should fucking take that seriously.
Yeah, you should do something with it.
I mean, you're not a paid lackey of Blizzard Entertainment. They're not paying you to be. Maybe they give you a free BlizzCon ticket or whatever. But
well, that's the big thing now.
You're not getting hand jobs from Jay Wilson, right?
Game critics is they are basically we're going to give you a game and you're going to talk nicely about it, and we're going to have a nice little thing. And if you say anything bad, you're not getting our games anymore.
Or getting our ads on your website.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we're going to get a Gamergate suddenly here. We need some women to harass.
Yeah.
Did you get one of your girlfriends on her and call her a slut? Then we can be Gamergate.
Yeah, there we go.
So last week's podcast was ruined because you guys couldn't be on there because you have girlfriends.
Right.
Bitches ruining video games once again, dude. Are either of you dating Anita Sarkeesian?
Misogyny. I can feel it.
Exactly. Okay, so any final thoughts, guys? We've done our podcast stuff. Obviously, we've only gone up to the first 100. Maybe in next week's show, we'll go through some more recent podcasts and hit some of the highlights and revisit all these exciting days, like when Jay Wilson quit.
That was fun.
Yeah, no, I think that it's really weird to go back and look at this stuff because I was just like a fan then. I was just like following the site and listening to the podcast. So I remember these episodes and you guys talking about this stuff. So it's kind of cool now to go back and look at it from this side of it.
Well, your first show ever was 144 Nerdwords, so if we get up to another 50 at least.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there's nothing else on that show that had anything really remarkable except for you.
It's just me.
So.
That's all that needed to happen.
That's all that matters. It was Nerdwords and MT1, and you've been on shows with MT1 since then.
Yeah, so. Yep. I did not realize that I popped my podcast cherry with him. Good to know.
Many people
I'm going to send him a fruitcake or something.
No, you gave him better than a fruitcake.
Thanks for the podcast, Jerry.
Again, of course, once we're getting that's like, a year ago, okay, a year and a half ago. So it's not, blast from the past. Right?
I'm a veteran now, okay? That's like a whole other life now.
I'd forgotten half the stuff on these ones from 2011. It's like, really? There was PvP in the game? Oh, that's right.
I'm going back, and as we're reading it, I'm like, I actually want to go back and listen to my original one from 20.
Oh my God. No, I don't want to do that. No, that's terrible.
Yeah. I will be in the description for this on YouTube and on our site on Diablo.net. I will be posting links to all these podcasts that we're mentioning the highlights from.
Yeah, I just want to,
so people can easily just click to them if they want to listen to some of the old parts and at least read the comments and stuff.
But the funny thing is, I remember all this stuff. It's like now that you brought it up, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that, and I still have the same thoughts on it. So it's like, okay, but I definitely
well, you were right then and you're right now.
Yeah, exactly. I knew better.
It's handy that way. No flip flops for you, right? Muggs?
No flip flops.
I do recall, speaking of flip-flops, one of the funny things when we were having our first roundtable over breakfast when I was at that Blizzard event in what was it, July 2012. We were all having a little, like a lunch thing. It was a breakfast meeting. So, like, we met in this little office room at Blizzard, and it was all the CMs, like Lyleria and whoever else was there at the time, Vayflare and a couple of other guys. Oh, Grimiku was there, and the other couple of guys who were behind the scenes. And they had, like a little... It was, like, catered, and there was, like, a bunch of muffins and a bunch of, like honeydew cubes, that kind of shit, you know, honeydew and cantaloupe in, like, this little plastic container. And people had... It was way at one end of the room, like this giant conference room made for like 30 people, and there were like 8 of us in there, you know, just the Fansites and the CMs. And they put the food at the very far end of the room, so you had to like get up and walk down this whole long table, like this walk of shame.
The walk of shame, yeah. They wanted to make sure you knew that you were getting free food.
And get your cold bagel and put some cream cheese on it, and then walk all the way back to your chair, and like it was all awkward. And the table's like this really nice, like really high quality wood, and the chairs are all like Aeron chairs and stuff. And everybody's all grubby looking, like dropping crumbs all over the place. It was just totally like the most awkward breakfast ever. Well, it was like eating with your girlfriend's parents after the first time you stayed overnight at her house or something, you know, and it's just like this walk of shame and shit. And like the second question Lyleria asked me, she goes, "So, how does it feel when people call you Flux 180? I was like, wait, what?
Why do they call you Flux 180?
Because, I think it was because we had been like a common voice of like rationality or negativity during the build-up to the game, and like, don't be so rose-colored, Diablo 3 is not the perfect game ever. And then after it came out, we were skeptical about stuff, but we weren't like total haterade.
Oh,
drinkers.
Right, yeah. I remember people used to get
mad
at
you.
you.
You guys are just sellouts. You're just like defending the game now. I'm like, yeah, it's those fat checks Blizzard sends us every day.
I remember those. People used to get mad at Flux for like, they were thinking you're because you weren't like ripping on everything every time.
Yep.
Yeah, and like a month later we got blackballed for 2 years. So obviously we weren't exactly doing what Blizzard wanted us to do or anything. But yeah, we just... In our minds, we were being the voice of reason. When people were totally hyped up and thinking the game was the greatest thing in history, we were like, okay, it's probably not the greatest thing. It'll have some rocky stuff at the start.
Yeah. And
then when people went to, full-on haterade mode, we were like, okay, it's got some problems, but it's not the worst thing ever. And so in both cases, people on the extremes think you're a sellout and horrible one way or the other, right?
Yep. Yeah, well, you can't please both sides. Or either side, apparently.
Luckily, these days, everyone loves the game. We're all a big, happy community family.
Yeah.
Well, I think people are a lot more rational about the game, though, or at least for the most part. You know,
or the crazy ones all just gave up 3 years ago.
Yeah. Well, it's just you kind of know what you know what to expect. You know what's out there. You know, they've set up this whole patching cycle. You're like, okay, this sucks. Maybe it'll get fixed next time. Okay, it didn't get fixed this time. We'll have to wait until next time. So it's kind of like they gave you something to look forward to. Versus back then, it was like patches like. They either come really quick in quick succession, or like you didn't hear anything forever, and like you never knew what their thought process was, or they'd come out and they'd say, "Yeah, we're fine with that. That's how we like it. That's how we think you should play the game," and then everybody would get really annoyed.
And the patches were like desperately treading water. You know, it's like, okay, the game is a total disaster, but we'll fix one aspect of it. You know,
they didn't even fix an aspect.
Like, hey, items
like
aren't totally terrible anymore.
Yeah, like here's a thing. Here's like I actually want to go back and read some of the patch notes. Like the big one.
I would love to go back and play the early game now. Obviously, we can't do that with it being online only, but if you could, wouldn't you like to just go back and try like the Inferno game again to see if it was really that bad? Like, maybe we just all sucked at it then. We didn't know how to use defensive gear.
we were just bad.
Well, no,
I'm sure it'd still be horrible, but wouldn't you be curious to like go to like version 1.03 or something?
Oh, that'd be cool.
I'd
try it.
I'd probably kick ass, but that's only because like I wouldn't have to figure anything out. Like I already know it. Like, I remember when, like, people made the thing, hey, listen, all resist is really good. And, like, all of a sudden, like, gear that went from, like, didn't have all resist to, like, gear that had all resist, like, went through the roof on the auction house, and people were buying it up like crazy and reselling it for a ton. So, but that was, like, a revelation. It was, like, all resist. You really want all resist. So.
Yeah, that was the biggest problem earlier. No one knew about toughness, and people were just getting one-shotted by every boss. Like, all our stats were an off.
Well, that's because of Demon Hunters and that tentacle spell that they had, like,
nether tentacles before they nerfed the hell out of that.
Yeah, nether tentacles, and like they would
never come back to a useful skill.
And they would be able to vault, and the only way they could get through it was killing everything. So everybody else figured, the only way we can get through it is to kill everything. So
I remember playing a barbarian early on and just getting getting killed like 4 times per boss battle. Like I thought, I need more damage. I got to be able to kill them faster. It's like, how about you just don't die every time they hit you? Like what?
Yeah, no, and I remember then it's like that's when Storm Shield was a big deal. Like Storm Shield, String of Ears, and Bojanglers. Like those were like the items you had to have on your Frenzy Barb. You're like, okay, I can actually do Act 3 now or Act 2 now.
And we get the same thing every patch. I mean, every new season starts off, people have new builds, and then after like a month, suddenly people are like 30 GRs higher just because they figure out better builds. I mean, we know how to play it now, but it's obviously things change each time. You find the new items that have nice synergies and stuff. I don't think there's that much of that in the early days because there were no synergies. I mean, there really weren't any legendaries that actually buffed individual skills.
Oh no, everything was the same thing.
All over. It was like you say, it was all resist. You know,
it was all resist. And then attack speed, crit, and critical hit damage, and like that was it. Like that's all you ever went for. So it's like you just had those things, and you would dual wield, and you would kind of attack faster, and like monks. Like I was a big monk player back then, so it's like you just wanted to attack more, so you could generate your sweeping wind would generate more cyclones, so you could do more damage, and like there was no like you said, there was no synergy. There was like no, I'm gonna run this just for the heck of it. It was you were gonna attack as fast as possible,
And then you would die, if not fast.
Yeah, and then die.
Yeah, it was all totally just a math problem.
Right, exactly.
You had to get more toughness and more damage, and then more attack speed, and the monsters would have a little more of this, whatever. Anyway, so any final thoughts, guys? I mean, we kind of jumped around topics here. Obviously, we're way back. We're 5 years ago on podcast at this point, talking about old stuff. But what do you? I mean, how's the season going? Briefly wrap it up here. What are you planning the rest of the season? Are you pushing for GR90? P1200?
I'm going for P1000. I mean, I still want P1000.
You're already there, dude.
I'm almost,
You're done.
yeah, and like I'm really enjoying the Satyr, so I'm gonna see how far until I get bored. But once I actually get bored with the Crusader, I'm probably just gonna peter off and like stop, wait for the next season. But so I don't know. I mean, maybe G85. I might try to push for that. I don't think I can get much higher than that without like really farming my ass off. So.
Will you be trying to break into the top 1,000 wizards here, which Nerdball?
Yeah.
Nerdball?
Yeah. I mean,
Nine
absolutely, that's the goal. But I'm not planning on doing that until much later. I've hit Paragon 800, which is the Paragon level I wanted to hit before I started pushing. Now I've got to find some gear, so I'm probably going to grind it out. I really won't do a big push until the last 2 or 3 weeks of the season. I've meant to do it that way every other season, and this season I'm actually trying to like grind and get as much looting done as I possibly can before I have the last 2 weeks to push as high as I can.
Yeah, I might try to push again on the wizard, but I don't know. I don't really like the energy twister channeling build, so I don't know what I'm going to do.
I'm liking it more the more I play it. It's
wearing you down.
It's the closest thing to a range build we've got right now, so I prefer it to the orbit build, but they're both fun. Gets old.
You're so squishy. It just drives me nuts.
Actually we're less squishy than we used to be, so it feels like it, at least with the Curious coming back in, and then some of the gem choices, because we were much squishier before.
You said
Squishy.
Okay, as I mentioned last time with Aahz, the most important milestone in the history of the Diablo 3 podcast was show number 5, where we started talking about mad cows, and for some reason someone started mooing, probably me. And that has become our trademark, and every show ends when we say, what do mad cows say? And mad cows say... Moo.
Moo. Moo. Moo. Moo.